No, don't worry about it. Just get home safe.
Calvin Brooks hurled the heavy wrench across his garage floor so hard it fractured the concrete and skidded straight under the lift. And for the very first time in 15 years, the guy everyone around town called the charity mechanic stood in the center of his auto repair shop, his fists trembling, with absolutely nothing left to lose. 11 hours later, he was kneeling in the freezing rain, swapping out a flat tire for a sobbing teenage girl who refused to give her name, and rejecting every single dollar she tried to hand him. He had absolutely no idea who her mother actually was, and he had no clue one phone call the very next morning would just blow his entire life wide open. Drop a comment with the city you are watching from so I can track just how far this story travels. And if you still believe real kindness gets paid back in America, hit subscribe and stick with me until the very end. The alarm clock buzzed at 4:40 in the morning, exactly the same way it had every single day for 11 years straight. Calvin Brooks killed the noise before the second beep even hit, making sure he didn't wake his daughter. He just lay there flat in the pitch dark for exactly 1 minute. He always gave himself that 1 minute. That was the quiet deal he made with himself a long time ago. 1 minute to feel totally exhausted. 1 minute to be sad. 1 minute to be a 38-year-old widower with $41 in the register, facing down a massive mortgage on a building nobody even wanted. Then the minute ran out, and he forced himself up out of bed. The bedroom floor was completely freezing. The heat had been broken since November because the furnace repair was $400, and $400 meant Amara got a warm coat, winter boots, and a full month of groceries. He bought a cheap space heater instead, plugged it into her room, and told her he preferred the cold. Claimed it woke him up, saying his own dad always believed freezing air builds tough character. She just looked at him with those sharp eyes, 8 years old and already way too smart, and told him he was a terrible liar. "I am a great liar," he told her. She called him the worst liar in America. He smiled, thinking about it now in the dark, pulling on the exact same heavy coveralls he wore yesterday and the day before, the ones with the name Brooks stitched right over the heart in thread that used to be bright red, but had faded to the dusty color of old brick. Downstairs in the narrow kitchen, he cracked 2 eggs into a frying pan, got the cheap coffee going, and just stood there, leaning on the counter, listening to the quiet house. Then his eyes found the envelope on the table. It had been sitting there for 6 solid days. He opened it exactly once. That was enough. He knew what it said. The way a guy knows what a doctor's face means before the doctor even speaks. He picked it up anyway. Read it again anyway. Men do that kind of thing. They just pick at it like a scab. Final notice. Commercial property loan number 44912. Brooks Auto and Tire. Past due $18,240. Payment in full is required within 30 days, or the lending institution will proceed with foreclosure. 30 days. 6 of them were already gone. He heard the wooden stairs creak and shoved the folded envelope deep into his back pocket before her foot even hit the bottom step. "You're up early," he said without turning around. "So are you," she shot back. "I'm always up early. I'm the dad. That's the job." Amara Brooks climbed up onto the kitchen stool, fully dressed in her school clothes, with her hair already neatly done. She handled it herself now, had for 2 straight years, ever since that rough morning he tried making a ponytail, and she checked the mirror, asking very politely if he messed it up on purpose. She pulled her heavy backpack up beside her like it was a fellow passenger. "Eggs," she announced. "Eggs again. You want to talk to the chef about it?" he asked. "You are the chef," she teased. "Then take it up with him because he's very sensitive." She laughed at that. God, that laugh. It sounded exactly like her mother. It had echoed her mother since she was 4 years old, and it completely wrecked him every single time, though he never once let her see it. He slid the hot plate in front of her, leaning on the counter across the kitchen, just to watch her eat. He did it every morning, because it was the only small part of the day that belonged entirely to him. Dad. Yeah. Are we okay? He didn't blink once. He'd gotten really good at not blinking. What kind of question is that? A regular one. We are totally fine, baby. Because Bethany Crail said something today. He straightened up slowly, said what Amara just pushed a piece of egg around her plate. She claimed her dad said your auto shop is closing down. Said you're She stopped right there. Just say it. I really don't want to, she whispered. Amara, look at me. If somebody out there says something about your daddy, you can repeat it right here in this kitchen. This kitchen is safe. Anything you hear out there, you can say in here. Say it. She finally looked up. She told me her dad called you a charity case, pretending to be a business. The old coffee maker gurgled in the silence. Outside, a passing truck rattled by with a terrible exhaust leak, and he automatically identified it, Bill Hurley's F-150. The exact muffler he'd warned Bill about twice. Okay, Calvin muttered. That is it. Okay. What do you expect me to do, sweetheart? March over to Bethany Crail's house at 5 in the morning and argue with an 8-year-old. You could just argue with her dad. Her dad, Calvin, exhaled a heavy breath through his nose. Her dad has a $30,000 alignment machine and a big sign that actually lights up. That is what he's got. Now let me ask you a question. What do I have? Amara didn't even hesitate. Me. He had to look out the kitchen window for a second. That's right, he told her. That's exactly right. So let Ray Crail keep his fancy sign. She ate for a minute, then spoke up quietly. It just isn't fair, though. No, Calvin said. It's not. He didn't lie to her about that. He never lied to her about that. Sure, he lied about the heat working, and he lied about enjoying the freezing air. But he never once told his little girl the world was fair, because one day she was bound to find out the hard way. And he wanted her to learn that truth from a man who loved her, rather than some stranger who didn't care at all. Brooks Auto and Tire sat down at the dead end of Delford Street, right where the town's money stopped flowing around 1994, and just never came back. It was a simple cinder block building with 2 bays. Just one lift-a-hand painted wooden sign faded so badly you could only make out the letters BRKAT and TIE if the sunlight hit it just perfectly. Plus, a gravel parking lot with a deep pothole Calvin had been patching from the same bucket of cold tar for 6 years. Directly across the street, and this was the cruel joke of it all, this was the punchline God wrote, but never bothered explaining. There sat Crail Precision Automotive. 9 massive bays. A bright LED sign. A waiting room packed with plush leather chairs. An espresso machine making 4 kinds of coffee. And a flat-screen television bolted to the wall showing sports on mute. Ray Crail bought that lot in 2016 and built it facing Calvin's shop, directly window to window. It was like a guy building a massive mansion right across from a shack, just so he could stare at it while he ate. Calvin unlocked his door at 6:15, rolled up the metal bay, flipped on the lights, and the 3rd fluorescent tube flickered and finally died, exactly the way it had been threatening to do for a month. Of course you did, he muttered at it. He was sliding under a Buick by 6:40 when he heard the laughing. He knew that sound. Everybody on Delford Street knew that laugh. Ray Crail was marching across the street carrying his coffee in a Crail Precision mug, wearing a matching Crail Precision polo shirt. Tommy Pike trailed right behind him, looking exactly like a small, nervous dog following a much bigger one. Ray was 52, incredibly thick through the shoulders, and had one of those punchable faces that always looked like he'd just finished telling a joke at someone else's expense. Cal Ray shouted out, "Cal, my buddy." Calvin slowly rolled out from under the Buick, but stayed on the floor. "Ray, how's business?" "Business is business," Ray replied. "That's what I love about you." Ray took a sip of his coffee, scanning the struggling shop. Exactly the way a guy inspects a used car he's about to lowball. You know Marlene Ellis came to me last week needing a brake job. Calvin said absolutely nothing. I quoted her $640. She says, well, Calvin does it for $200. Ray laughed out loud. Tommy Pike chuckled a half-second later because agreeing was Tommy's entire job. $200, Cal. That isn't a business price. That is a straight-up donation. She is 74 years old, Ray, and she's on a fixed income with a bad hip and drives to dialysis twice a week. So that is her situation. Well, that ain't my situation, Ray shot back. Ray gestured around Calvin's garage with his coffee mug, a dismissive little wave, taking in the cracked concrete, the flickering bulbs, the dead sign outside. And look exactly what your situation got you. 15 years, Cal. 15 whole years, and you can't even buy a damn light bulb. You know what they call you over at the diner. I've heard it, Calvin said. The charity mechanic. I've heard it, Calvin repeated. It's definitely not a compliment. Calvin finally stood up, wiping his hands on a grease rag. Ray was a big guy, but Calvin was bigger. And there was a half-second right there. There was always that half-second every single time where Ray remembered that fact. He shifted his weight slightly, covering the sudden nerves with another slow sip of his coffee. Was there something you needed, Ray? Just being neighborly, he said. Right. Actually, Ray snapped his fingers like it just occurred to him, and it had not, because nothing ever just occurred to Ray Crail. Actually, yeah, a little birdie tells me the bank sent you some paper. The rag just stopped dead in Calvin's hands. Where did you hear that? Small-town Ray smiled. Gordon over at First Cumberland plays golf with me on Thursdays. Now do not get sore about it. I am not here to gloat. You are absolutely here to gloat. I am here to help, Ray said, spreading his arms. Calvin, just listen. I will take the lot off your hands, the whole thing, building land, whatever is left in here. I will pay off the bank, put 10 grand cash right in your pocket, and you walk away clean with your head held high. 10 grand. That is maybe a year of rent somewhere. That is a fresh start for you and your little girl. Calvin just stared at him for a long, quiet moment. How much is the lot worth, Ray? Well, that is what we would have to figure out. $68,000, Calvin said. That is the county assessment. I have it right here in the desk drawer. $68,000 for the land alone. More if the county ever runs that bypass through which they have been talking about for 4 years. Ray kept the smile on his face, but it stopped meaning anything at all. So what you are offering me, Calvin said, is about 15 cents on the dollar, all on account of me being desperate. I am offering you a rope, Calvin. You are offering me a rope with a tight knot in it. Tommy Pike actually laughed at that, then realized what he had done and shut up fast. Ray clenched his jaw. He turned and started walking back across the street. Then he stopped halfway across the blacktop, turned around, and finally said the thing he came to say the whole time. You could see it all over him, the exact way a man looks when he has been chewing on a bitter sentence all morning long. You know what your real problem is, Calvin? You think being a good man is a solid business plan. No, Calvin said. I just think it is the only thing I have got that you cannot buy. Ray just stared right at him. Then he let out an ugly laugh and walked back to his 9 shiny bays and his lit-up sign. Tommy Pike lingered behind. Tommy was 26 and had a face that always looked like an apology. Mr. Brooks, go on, Tommy. He does not mean it. He means every single word of it, Calvin said, sliding right back onto the Buick. That is the only honest thing about the man. At 9:20, Marlene Ellis walked in. She slipped inside the exact same way she always did, sideways, through the door, apologizing before she even spoke, clutching a little coin purse with both hands like a bird trying to escape. Calvin, honey, I am so sorry. Morning, Miss Marlene. I know I promised I would have the rest of it by the 1st, and I did. I had it set aside, but Denise's boy got really sick. They had to take him down to Nashville, and I gave her the gas money. And I know that is not your problem. That is not your problem at all, Miss Marlene. Calvin stepped around the desk and placed his hand flat on the counter, palm down, exactly the way you would calm a spooked horse. Stop. Just breathe. She stopped. She took a breath. Then he asked what the car was doing. Her chin trembled a little. It is making that noise again, the loud grinding. And I have dialysis on Thursday with nobody to take me. Denise is down in Nashville, and I... Pull it in. Calvin, pull it in, Miss Marlene. She looked up at him, her eyes welling with tears, and said she could give him $30. You can give me absolutely nothing. Calvin Brooks. Miss Marlene. I am going to say this one time, and then we are going to talk about something else entirely. He leaned his weight on the counter. You brought me a warm plate of chicken and dumplings every single Sunday for 6 months after Danielle died. Every Sunday. You never asked if I wanted it, and you never let me say no. You want to know what your credit is worth in this shop. It is worth a whole lot more than money. Now pull the car in before I lose my patience. She cried a little bit. She did that specific thing older women do, pressing her fingertips right under her eyes, getting mad at herself for shedding a tear. You are a good boy, she said. I am 38. You are a good boy, she repeated, much harder this time, like she was correcting the official record for God himself. He got her old car up on the lift. The rear brakes were pure metal on metal. She had been driving on nothing but horrible noise and sheer prayer for an entire month. He had a brand new set of pads on the shelf he had been saving to sell. $84 of inventory. He stared at those pads. He thought about the thin envelope sitting in his back pocket. Then he put the pads on her car anyway. Across the street, through the window, Ray Crail watched him do it, turned to Tommy Pike, muttered something, and they both just laughed. The bankman showed up right at 2 o'clock. Gordon Vetter pressed khakis, a cheap rental car haircut, holding a leather folder he slapped open on the counter like he was serving a federal warrant. Mr. Brooks, I want you to know this is not personal. It never is. The financial institution has been more than patient with you. 22 years my daddy banked at First Cumberland, Calvin said. 22 solid years. He shook Bill Cumberland's hand back in 1988, and that was the entire loan. The whole thing. Just a handshake? Yes, well, First Cumberland was officially acquired in 2019. I know exactly when it was acquired. Gordon Vader cleared his throat. $18,240 in 24 days. I am completely aware. May I ask, do you actually have a plan? Calvin looked at him, really studied the guy. Vetter was maybe 30, probably a nice kid. Probably had a wife, a starter house, and a boss who screamed at him. Probably went home every night and told her how much he hated this part of the job. You want to know my big plan? Calvin said. For the record, yes. My plan is, I open the bay doors at 6:15 and I close at 7. I fix whatever broken mess comes through that door, and I do it right the first time so it never comes back. That has been my solid plan for 15 years. It is the only one I have got. Veter jotted something down. He wrote it down the exact way a man writes something he desperately does not want to write. Mr. Brooks, I will be totally honest with you here. That is not a business plan. That is just a habit. Calvin gave no answer. Veter slowly closed his leather folder. At the glass door, he paused. There is an interested party looking at the parcel. If this goes to public auction, I am not legally permitted to say who. You do not have to, Novator said quietly. I suppose I do not. Amara got off the school bus at 3:35, marched into the shop, and slammed her heavy backpack in the corner, right where she always threw it. And Calvin knew immediately from the violent sound of that throw, something was very wrong. He did not ask her right away. You never ask a kid right away. You have to let them settle into the room first. He just went back under the hood of the Buick. She climbed up onto the metal stool by the tall toolbox and started spinning it around real slow. 2 minutes passed, then 3. Then she spoke. "Dad, how much money do we actually have?" He pulled himself out from under the heavy hood. "Why?" "Because Bethany Crail said her dad is going to buy your auto shop." Calvin set his wrench down very carefully on the dirty fender. Very, very carefully. She said that today at lunch, right in front of everybody. Amara's little chin was doing the exact same tremor Marlene Ellis's chin had done earlier, and seeing that just about tore him apart. She claimed her dad said we are going to have to move away. She told me she felt sorry for me, and she said it in that specific tone, that awful, pitying, sorry voice. What did you do about it? Nothing. Amara twisted her small hands tightly in her lap. I just told her my dad's shop is the absolute best shop in town and everybody knows it. And then Bethany said, "If it is the best shop, then how come it looks like that Calvin sat heavy on the rolling creeper?" He sat all the way down low to the concrete, making sure he was physically below her, forcing her to look down at him instead of up. He had learned that brilliant trick from Danielle. Get under them, Calvin. Never talk down to her. Get under her and let her stand on you. Come here. She stepped over. He gently took both of her hands. I want to tell you something, and I need you to remember it when you are old and I am gone. Dad, just listen to me. A man named Ray Crail across the street has a fancy sign that lights up the sky. It cost him $12,000. You know what is under that sign. What, Ray Crail? Calvin gave a tired shrug. That is it. That is all that is under it. A sign is just cheap paint and some electricity, baby. It does not tell you a single true thing about what is actually inside. But people look at the sign. Yeah, he nodded. They really do. Most folks never bother looking at anything else. He squeezed her hands tight. But some of them do. Some good people walk right past the glowing sign and come find the actual man. And those are the only people whose opinion has ever been worth a single nickel to me. Do you understand? She stayed totally quiet. Then she said something that dropped him straight through the concrete floor. Dad, your shop feels like a place where people are truly safe. He could not even speak for a second. Yeah, he finally managed to say. It is the absolute safest place I know. Amara looked around. It is safer than school? Safer than the house, even, because in here, you are always right there. Everybody who comes in is scared about something, and then they leave, and they are not scared anymore. She just shrugged like it was completely obvious, like it was the most ordinary, everyday observation in the entire world. Because that is what you do. You calm people down. Calvin Brooks, a man who buried his wife, raised his girl alone, and hadn't shed a single tear in front of anyone since 2017. Stood up fast, he marched straight to the parts washer, turned his back, and pretended to dig around in a drawer. Dad, I am fine, baby. Are you crying? He always was the worst liar in America, so he just wasn't going to answer that. The rain hit at 5:40. Not a gentle rain either. It was that bitter November downpour, the kind driving a freezing wind that makes your knuckles ache in about 90 seconds flat. Amara worked on her homework at the desk under the single working lamp. Calvin closed out the register at 6:50, counted it twice. $41. Then he counted it a third time, something a guy only does when he hopes basic math might finally show him some mercy. $41. He had slapped $84 worth of brake pads on Marlene Ellis's car and only brought in $41 for the day. That was the entire ledger for Brooks Auto and Tire on the 4th Tuesday in November, exactly 24 days out from foreclosure. And that is when it happened. The one thing he had never done, not even once. Not when Danielle got the diagnosis, and not at her funeral. Not even that first night Amara woke up screaming for her mom, and he had zero idea what to do. so he just sat on her bedroom floor until sunrise. He grabbed the 3/4-inch wrench off the bench and hurled it. Threw it hard, sidearm, putting absolutely everything he had behind it. 15 years of frustration, all those Sundays, the crazy days, all the $600 brake jobs he did for $200, all the light bulbs he could never afford. The heavy steel smacked the concrete, cracking the floor. It skipped and clanged, ringing under the hydraulic lift like a heavy bell inside an empty church. Then, dead silence, followed by a small voice from the desk. "Dad." He just stood there, both fists shaking hard. Slowly, he turned around. Amara was staring right at him, her pencil still gripped tight in her hand. She wasn't scared of him. Never scared of him. She was scared for him, which was 1,000 times worse. Calvin walked over and dropped to one knee. "I am so sorry." She said it was okay. He said no, it wasn't. He rubbed his face with a greasy hand, leaving a dark smudge he didn't even notice. "That was me being weak in front of you, and you are never going to see that again." She said his name again. Amara rested her small hand against his cheek. 8 years old. It is not weak to be mad. Mama used to throw stuff constantly, she told him. Calvin laughed, but the sound came out broken. "Your mama had quite an arm on her, too." "I know," she said. "You told me about the plate." She chucked a plate at the wall over a stupid parking ticket. "And you kept the broken piece." "I kept the piece." He patted his chest pocket. There really was a chip of blue ceramic in there, something he had carried for 11 straight years. "Best day of my life." "She threw a plate right at you," Amara pointed out. "Best day of my life," he repeated. This time his laugh was totally real. Amara laughed with him, and the auto shop felt okay again. He walked over, picked up the heavy wrench, and dropped it on the bench. Then he stared down at the fresh crack in the concrete. "Add it to the list," he mumbled. Amara asked, "What list?" "The list of things I'm going to fix when I get rich." She asked what was number 1. The sign outside, he answered without even hesitating. Number 1 has always been the shop sign. Calvin was yanking the rolling bay door down at 7:06 when bright headlights swung into the lot. He almost didn't stop closing up. God knows he really almost ignored them. He had the metal door at chest height, and his shoulders were completely done. Plus, a thawed pack of chicken thighs sat at home. He had promised his girl a hot dinner. But those headlights came in all wrong. Too fast at the tight turn, then way too slow. Finally, a hard, jerky stop right over the worst pothole. That told Calvin everything. This driver wasn't even looking at the lot. It was somebody running purely on autopilot, their head completely lost somewhere else. He shoved the bay door back up. He told Amara to stay inside. She asked who it was. "Don't know yet. Just stay put and let me look." It was a black Range Rover, maybe 2 years old. The massive one. A $60,000 or $70,000 rig idling in a messy gravel lot on Delford Street. Nothing that nice had parked there in a full decade. If Calvin was being totally honest, his first thought was, they are lost. Rich folks got off the interstate, missed their turn, and ended up down here in a panic turning around in his lot. It happened 4 or 5 times a year. His second thought hit when he got close enough to check the front passenger tire. It wasn't just flat, the tire was completely gone, shredded to the inner belts, with heavy rubber hanging off in sad strips. The bare rim had been driven on hard. You could see the bright shine where naked metal had basically eaten the asphalt. "Oh, sweetheart," Calvin mumbled out loud. "How far did you drive on that thing?" Then he finally saw her. She sat frozen behind the steering wheel, both hands locked at 10 and 2, staring blankly straight through the rain-streaked windshield at absolutely nothing. And she was crying. Not that delicate movie crying either. She was weeping the way people only cry when they think they are completely alone. Face wrecked, shoulders heaving, mouth wide open without making a single sound. A kid. 17, maybe 18 years old. Calvin stopped about 8 feet away from her door and quickly did the math. The rough survival math a black man in a small American town does automatically at 7-something at night in the dark rain with a sobbing white teenage girl parked in his lot driving a $70,000 SUV. He crunched those odds in about half a second flat, mostly because he had been doing it his entire life. Then he carefully stepped forward into the harsh yellow light so she could see him clearly. Hands out wide where they could be seen. Empty. He tapped the wet glass with one knuckle. Twice. Soft. She flinched so violently her elbow smashed the steering wheel horn. It blared and she let out a scream. He told her it was okay. Calvin spoke through the glass, not moving a single inch closer. "It is all right. I am right here. I own this auto shop. My name is Calvin. This is my shop. That is my actual name up on the building. I am not going to come any closer than this." She just stared at him, hands clamped tight over her mouth. "You hear me? I am not going to move. You just breathe." She took a shaky breath. "There you go," he said softly. The window rolled down barely 3 inches. Her voice was completely destroyed. She kept apologizing, stammering that she was parked in his lot and needed to move. Calvin stopped her. "You are not parked. You just stopped moving. There is a big difference." He kept his tone completely level, the exact same steady voice he used with difficult customers, the same one he used on his own kid 40 minutes ago. "Do you realize your tire is gone?" She leaned over to look and let out a miserable noise. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Did I do that?" He asked how long she had been driving on it. She said she didn't know. He pushed, "How long, sweetheart? I do not know." It ripped out of her like a raw scream. Then she immediately flinched back, bracing herself like she expected to be hit just for raising her voice. Calvin saw that fearful flinch, filed it deep away in his mind, and did not like it one single bit. She stammered out another apology, said she heard a loud bang somewhere miles back on the dark county road. She just kept driving. "You just kept on driving," Calvin repeated slowly. She nodded. He asked her for how many miles. She stayed quiet. Calvin stared back down the empty asphalt. That county road was 11 long miles of pure nothing. 0 streetlights, absolutely no shoulder, and steep, muddy ditches flanking both sides. A kid had just driven 11 miles on a bare rim, in the pitch dark, in freezing rain, with wild sparks spraying off the front end, and she never stopped once. Not because she couldn't pull over, but because she hadn't even noticed. Calvin had been alive long enough to know exactly what that meant. This wasn't a car problem. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, here is what is happening. Your expensive rim is ruined, your tire is finished, and you are not driving this heavy rig another block. Not a single block. Now do you have someone you can call?" She let out a dry, awful laugh. She said she had a phone, a very nice phone actually, but nobody to dial. She looked at him through the streaky rain running down the glass between them. Then she spoke in the flattest, emptiest voice he had ever heard from a kid. "There is nobody who wants to hear from me right now." Calvin Brooks just stood there in the freezing rain and felt something deep inside his tired chest turn over. "All right," he told her. "Well, lucky for you, you didn't call anybody anyway. You managed to land in the exact right parking lot." She pointed out that his auto shop was closed. Said she read the sign and stopped because she thought the lot was empty. She thought nobody would catch her. "You thought nobody would see you." Calvin finished for her. She didn't say a single word. That silence was the only answer he needed. Calvin wiped the cold rain off his worn face. "Here is the funny thing about that old sign. It doesn't really work half the time anyhow. Never truly has. Been meaning to fix it for 6 years now." He nodded back toward the dark garage bay. "I'm going to grab my jack and a heavy breaker bar. That is it. That is all I am getting. You can watch me the entire time. I will stay directly in the light. You can lock your car doors. Keep them locked for all I care. I am not going to ask you to step out of that vehicle. But this blown wheel is coming off, a spare is going on, and then you are going safely home. Do you understand me? Her mouth trembled in the cold. I cannot pay you right now. Calvin stopped walking toward the bay. He turned around. Did I ask you for money? No. But did I say one single word about cash? No. Then do not put words in my mouth, young lady. I have got plenty of my own. And for the very first time, just for a split second, something shifted on that girl's face that was not pure misery. It was surprise. Pure, blank surprise, like a person handed a dictionary in a language they absolutely did not speak. He worked out in the freezing rain for 22 minutes. She stepped out of the car at minute 4. He never asked her to. She just did. She stood there under the garage overhang about 10 feet back, hugging her arms. She wore a winter coat that probably cost way more than Calvin's entire tow truck. Shivering so incredibly hard, he could actually hear her teeth chattering. He did not look up at her. He had figured out pretty fast that being watched was the thing hurting her most. So he kept his eyes locked on the tire and talked to the rim. Lug nuts are seized up. That is not your fault. That is on whoever hammered them on with an impact gun and zero torque wrench, which is roughly 90% of the auto shops in this entire county. Silence. You have a full-size spare mounted under the back. That is good news. A lot of newer models give you a tiny donut the size of a dinner plate and say good luck. Absolute silence. Then a tiny voice. Why are you talking to me? Because it is freezing cold. You are standing there, and it would be rude not to. Dead silence. Heavy rain hammering the metal roof. Most people ask me questions, she said. About what? About who I actually am. Calvin grunted, leaning hard on the breaker bar. The rusted nut snapped loose with a loud crack. That is 1, he said. 4 to go. Are you going to ask? Nope. Why not? Because you have been crying for about an hour now, Calvin said. And in my personal experience, when somebody has been crying for an hour, the absolute last thing on God's green earth they want is a total stranger asking them questions. He heard her breath hitch right behind him. He set the second lug nut onto the wet concrete. Besides, he added, I don't need to know who you are. I only need to know exactly what size wheel you've got. And I already know that. A really long pause followed. Then she made a small sound that might have been a genuine laugh if you were feeling generous. Right around minute 11, he stepped into the repair shop and came back outside holding 2 things. He handed one to her, a plastic bottle of water, still warm from sitting on the shelf. She stared at it like it was a wild animal. Take it. I'm not thirsty. You've been crying for an hour, Calvin said. You're dehydrated whether you feel it or not, and you have a real drive ahead of you tonight. Drink this before you start driving. Sienna Whitmore, though he didn't know her name yet and wouldn't for another 14 hours, took the water bottle in both hands. She stood there staring at it. Then her face came apart, not just crying like before. It was worse, like something structural inside her had suddenly failed. She dropped down and just sat right there on the wet concrete lip of the garage bay in her $1,000 winter coat. She rested the bottle in her lap and sobbed heavily into her hands, with her entire body shaking. Calvin didn't move toward her. He set the breaker bar down quietly and sat down too, about 8 feet away, leaning back against the tire he had just pulled off. He simply waited. He waited a very long time. I'm sorry, she managed to say finally. You keep saying that. I don't know why I am. It's just water. Yeah, Calvin said, I know. And she looked up at him with her ruined face and something in the exact way he said it. Yeah, I know. It told her he actually did know, that he wasn't confused at all, that he had understood the whole thing from the second she rolled her window down 3 inches. You don't even know me, she whispered. Nope. Then why are you being so nice to me? Calvin Brooks looked over at that rich kid sitting on his wet concrete in the freezing rain. 11 miles of totally ruined rim trailing behind her, and absolutely nobody in the world she felt she could call. And he thought about his daughter inside the shop doing long division under a small desk lamp. He thought about the heavy envelope shoved in his back pocket, and he thought about having exactly $41 in a cash register. A long time ago, he said, I was 23 years old. I broke down on the interstate just outside Knoxville, with $11 in my pocket and a wife 6 months pregnant sitting in the passenger seat. Middle of the night in dead February, and a man finally stopped. Old white guy driving a wrecker named Earl. He towed us 40 miles, fixed my water pump right in his own driveway, and wouldn't take a single dime. Calvin just shrugged in the rain. I asked him why. You know what he told me? What? He said. Somebody did it for me in 1971. You'll do it for somebody else later. That's the whole system. Calvin stood back up and returned to the wheel. That's it, he said. That's the whole answer. I'm not a good man, sweetheart. I'm just in the system. Right across the street, in the bright yellow light of Cray Precision Automotive, Ray Cray stood at the window with Tommy Pike beside him. Look at this, Ray said. Look at this right here. That's a Rover. That's a $90,000 Rover, Tommy. And that dumb son of a gun is doing the tire swap totally for free. You don't know that? Oh, I know that. Ray sipped his black coffee. You want to bet me $20 I say he doesn't take a single dollar? $20, Tommy. Tommy Pike watched Calvin Brooks kneeling over there in the freezing rain. He watched the shivering girl sitting on the wet concrete. Something moved in Tommy's expression that he simply didn't have a name for. I'm not taking that bet, he said very quietly. Why not? Because I would absolutely lose. At minute 22, Calvin torqued the last nut, dropped the floor jack, and stood back up. His knees screamed at him, and he just ignored them. You're completely done. She was on her feet by then. She already had her expensive wallet out. She held a black card in her hand. Calvin had never seen one in person, only in movies. Even in the rain, in the dead dark, he could tell it wasn't cheap plastic. It was solid metal. It had real weight to it. Please, she said, please, just take whatever. Take all of it. I don't care. Put it away. You don't understand. I have to. Put it away. Why? And there it finally was. The real thing. The ugly truth under all of it, ripping out of her at full volume in an empty parking lot. Why won't you take it? Everybody takes it. Everybody in my entire life takes it. That's what it's for. That's the only thing I'm for. She stopped slapping both hands over her mouth, totally horrified at what had just come out of her. Heavy rain. Calvin Brooks stood there, soaked through, holding a lug wrench in his hand, mud up to his elbows. Sweetheart, he said very gently, somebody helped me once when I really needed it. I'm just passing it forward tonight. That's all this is. It's not some big favor, and it's not charity, and you don't owe me one single thing. Listen to me now. He patiently waited until she finally looked up at him. And this has got not one single thing to do with your money. I don't want it. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever. You could be the absolute richest kid in America, or you could be as dead broke as I am. Same flat tire, same rain, same price. She just stared at him. Now go home, he said. Go slow. That spare is perfectly fine, but don't push it over 60. She got back inside the car. She sat in the driver's seat for a second. Then the power window rolled down all the way. She looked out at him, and her whole face had shifted. It had changed in a way that Calvin Brooks would think about for the rest of his entire life. Nobody has ever done that, she said. Done what? Actually given me something. And then she drove out onto Delford Street, turned left toward the highway, and she was completely gone. Calvin stood alone in his empty lot in the rain for a minute. He held a wrench, a ruined tire resting at his feet, and exactly $41 sitting in his register. Then he walked back inside, rolled the heavy garage door down, toweled off his wet head, and looked over at his daughter. She had watched the entire thing through the front window and hadn't said one single word about it. What he asked. Amara just smiled at him. Nothing, she said. Nothing, Dad. That night he put her to bed right at 9:40 and stood in her doorway exactly the way he did every single night. Dad, go to sleep. Who was she? Just somebody with a flat tire. She was crying. Yeah, she was. Is she okay now? Calvin really thought about it. He thought about her sharp flinch when she raised her own voice. He thought about her saying nobody wanted to hear from her right then. He thought about a kid driving 11 miles on a bare metal rim without even noticing. I don't know, baby, he said honestly. I really hope so. You unscared her, though. I just changed a tire. Dad. Amara rolled over in bed and pulled her heavy blanket up. You unscared her. I could easily see it from the window. He turned off her bedroom light. He didn't sleep. He lay in the cold dark with the envelope on his nightstand, doing the exact same rough arithmetic he had been doing for 6 straight days. 18,240 divided by 24 days divided by $41. Every single road that math went down ended in the exact same place. Ray Cray, standing in this shop with a clipboard, and Amara in a different school in some different town telling a different set of kids that her daddy used to own a garage. At 6:12 the following morning, he stood right there at the kitchen counter, cracking 2 eggs into a hot pan and repeating the exact same thing to himself. He told himself this every single morning. 1 minute, that is all you get. Then his phone lit up on the kitchen table. Unknown number. Calvin Brooks stared at it ringing right next to a foreclosure notice, and he almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, he finally picked it up. Is this Calvin Brooks? A woman's voice. Calm. Way too calm. The exact kind of calm a man quickly learns to distrust, because in Calvin's experience, absolutely nobody was ever that calm at 6:12 in the morning unless they had already made a decision about you. Speaking. Do you own the repair shop over on Delford Street? I do. He turned the stove burner down. Ma'am, if this is about a warranty, it isn't. If it's about an unpaid bill, it isn't that either. A heavy pause. He heard a rustle on her end. Paper shifting. A pen set down. Mr. Brooks, my name is Victoria Whitmore. Calvin didn't say a word back. He stayed quiet because the eggs were burning, and he had completely stopped seeing them. That name just came through the phone and landed inside his cramped kitchen like a heavy piece of furniture. Nobody had ordered that. Everybody around here knew that name. It was plastered on the side of 2 massive buildings downtown. It was on the commercial trucks running the interstate at 4 in the morning. It was engraved on a plaque at the hospital where Danielle had died. Big brass letters in the lobby for the Whitmore family wing. He had walked right past that sign every single day for 9 long weeks. Holding his wife's hand, he never once thought about it as a real person. Mr. Brooks. I am here. You went quiet. I am fully aware of that, ma'am. You clearly know the name. Everybody knows the name, Calvin finally said. That is kind of the entire point of it, isn't it? Something shifted on the other end of the line. It might have just been a breath, or it might have been a laugh that never made it all the way out. My daughter actually came home last night, Victoria Whitmore said. And Calvin Brooks, standing in his freezing kitchen at 6:12 in the morning, with an eviction notice on the table and $41 in his shop register, said the only thing that popped into his head. Is she okay? There was a massive silence on the line. Then it dragged on so long he checked the phone screen to see if she had hung up. What she said. Your daughter, is she okay? She was pretty tore up last night, and she had driven a good ways on that rim. I have honestly been thinking about her since about 10 o'clock. So, is she okay? Another heavy silence. Mr. Brooks, Victoria said very slowly, I have been on this phone since 5:30 this morning. I've spoken to my head of security, my attorney, and the guy who runs my family office. Every single one of them asked me the exact same first question. What did they ask? What does he want? Calvin just looked down at the burnt eggs. Well, he said, I want to know if she is okay. He heard her set something down hard. He heard a desk chair move. She is asleep. Victoria said she finally got home at 8:40. She came straight into my office, which she never does. She has not voluntarily stepped into my office. She stopped, then started over. She stood in the doorway and told me a mechanic in a garage fixed her tire in the pouring rain, flat out refused her money, handed her a cold bottle of water, and never even asked her name. And then she just started crying, and she could not stop. I couldn't get another single word out of her. She went straight upstairs, and she has been asleep ever since. Okay, Calvin said. I take it that's not an ordinary thing for her. No, ma'am. I did not imagine it was. My daughter does not cry in front of me, Mr. Brooks. Well, she cried in front of me, Calvin said, and I am just a stranger with dirty hands. I really wouldn't take that personal if I were you. Sometimes it is a lot easier with a complete stranger. There is no heavy bill at the end of it. He heard her breathe out. You know, she said you were really not what I expected. You clearly had a picture in your head. No, I had 3 full pages in my head. My security team pulled a background file on you by 5:50. Would you like to know what is in it? Not particularly. Calvin James Brooks, 38, widower, 1 daughter, 8, 15 years at the same address. 211 verified customer reviews averaging 4.9, no lawsuits, no complaints filed with the state board, no liens except, ma'am, except one from First Cumberland Bank, filed 19 days ago, on the shop property itself for $18,240. Calvin dropped the hot pan right into the sink, the metal hissing loudly. You had somebody look me up before 6 in the morning, he said. Yes, why? Because a guy who does something for absolutely nothing, Victoria Whitmore said, is either the best person you'll meet all year or the most dangerous, expensive one. That is a hell of a way to live. It has kept me alive. No, ma'am. Calvin leaned heavily on the kitchen counter. It has kept you rich. Those really aren't the same thing. Now, if you don't mind, I have got a kid to get out to a school bus stop. So, did you call just to thank me, or did you call to check me out? Because you can only do one before you finally hang up. He heard her actually laugh then. One short syllable of it, sharp and genuinely surprised, like something had slipped past a guard that hadn't been bypassed in a very long time. I called, she said, to see if you take appointments. Calvin just blinked. Appointments? I have a specific vehicle I'd like looked at. Ma'am, you literally own a fleet. You've got a whole downtown building full of people whose entire job is maintaining your vehicles. I do. So what on earth do you need me for, that Victoria Whitmore said, is exactly the question I intend to answer. 9 o'clock today. Is that going to be a problem? 9 is perfectly fine. Mr. Brooks, I would like to be crystal clear about something before I show up. I am not bringing you a check. I don't want you spending the next 3 hours imagining that I am. Calvin's jaw tightened up. Ma'am, I wasn't imagining a single thing. Everyone imagines it. Then you have been meeting the absolute wrong people your whole life, Calvin said, and I'm truly sorry to hear it. 9 o'clock. Doors open at 6:15, but 9 is fine. And bring the registration because I don't work on a car I can't verify actually belongs to whoever is standing in front of me. Another pause. You are honestly going to ask me for a registration. I ask everybody for a registration, Calvin said firmly. That is just how it works down here. And then he hung up on Victoria Whitmore. He stood perfectly still for about 4 seconds. Then he muttered out loud to the empty kitchen. "Oh, you absolute idiot." Who was that? Amara was standing on the bottom stair in her school clothes. Nobody. You are the worst liar in America, so I have been told. He scraped the ruined eggs into the trash and started cracking 2 more. It was just a customer. You totally yelled at a customer. I did not yell. I firmly conversed. Dad. She climbed right up onto the kitchen stool. You told a paying customer to bring their registration. You never ask people for registration. Miss Marlene doesn't even have a registration. You told me she's kept it in a drawer at her house since 2011. Just eat your eggs. Who was it? Calvin set the warm plate down. He looked right at her. You remember that girl from last night? The one you unscared? Well, that was her mama. Amara's fork stopped halfway up to her mouth. Is she mad? And it suddenly hit him that his 8-year-old daughter's very first instinct upon hearing a rich white woman called her father about her own white daughter was, is she mad? And something ice cold went through Calvin Brooks that had absolutely nothing to do with the broken furnace. No, baby, he said quietly. She is not mad. Then what does she want? Calvin looked out the kitchen window at the gray dawn coming up over the roofline. That, he said softly, is the exact right question. He got down to the auto shop at 6:10 and did something he had not done in 6 full years. He deeply cleaned it. Not just a quick wipe down, a real clean. He swept the bay twice over. He rolled the parts washer back against the wall so it didn't look totally abandoned. He took every single wrench out of the top toolbox and laid them back in by size. They already were organized that way because they had been for 15 years. But he did it anyway, his hands shaking just a little. He wiped the front counter. Then he wiped it down again. He found an old can of degreaser, got down on his knees and went at the crack in the concrete where a wrench had hit, scrubbing like he could somehow pull the anger right out of the floor. By 7:40, he caught himself standing dead in the middle of his own repair shop. He looked at it exactly the way a stranger would, and he absolutely hated himself for it. No, he said out loud. He tossed the dirty rag down. No, sir, because he knew exactly what he was doing. He had watched his own father do it. He'd watched Robert Brooks put on a stiff tie just to go ask for a bank loan he had already earned. Calvin watched him practice his voice in the truck. He watched a full-grown man shrink himself down just so some guy with money would not get spooked by his size. And Robert Brooks died at 61, still owing that bank cash, and still saying yes sir to men who just called him by his first name. Calvin took his grease rag and threw it onto the bench where it belonged. He grabbed the parts washer, dragged it back to its spot, stared at a familiar crack in the concrete, and told it to stay right there. And that is exactly how Ray Crail found him at 8:50 a.m., standing dead center in the middle of his auto shop, arms folded tight, staring down that crack in the floor like it owed him rent. Cal, you feeling okay? Never better. Ray held his coffee because Ray always held his coffee. Tommy Pike hovered behind him, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Saw you out in the rain last night, Ray said. Is that right? 22 minutes. Calvin looked up from the floor. You timed me. I just checked the clock a couple times. Ray grinned. $90,000 Rover in your lot, and you stood out there acting like a valet. Tell me you charged her. Calvin said absolutely nothing. Tell me you at least charged her something. Ray, what exactly do you want? I just want to understand you. And there was a weird edge to Ray's voice that sounded almost totally sincere. That was always the absolute worst part about Ray Crail. Every once in a while, a real human being flickered behind those eyes, then just completely vanished. I genuinely do. You have 24 days, you have a kid, and some rich girl parks in your lot with money spilling out of her pockets, and you just turn it down. Explain that to me like a 5-year-old. She was crying, Ray. So Calvin just shrugged. That is the explanation. Ray shook his head. That is not an explanation. That is a bumper sticker. Then the lot went totally dark. Well, not dark. Blocked. Something heavy pulled off Delford Street, swung hard into the gravel, and parked. The neon glow from the Cray Precision sign vanished across the entire floor of Calvin's repair bay. It was a Mercedes. Not a flashy one, though. Black, low to the ground, and quiet. The kind of ride that never announces itself because it simply does not have to. Behind it sat a second car. Behind that, a third. Tommy Pike muttered a confused sound. Ray Crail turned around with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. He did not put it down, and he did not take a sip. It just hovered in the air 6 inches from his face for what felt to Tommy like one long, agonizing minute. Then the car doors opened. The first guy out was around 50, built thick like a metal filing cabinet. He did not glance at Ray Crail, and he did not bother looking at Calvin. He studied absolutely everything else. The roof line, the main road, the back alley, the second bay, and every single exit. He cleared the area in exactly 4 seconds. Then he planted himself by the rear door, and Victoria Whitmore stepped out of the vehicle. She looked way smaller than Calvin had expected. That was his very first thought. Something he would remember later and feel pretty stupid about. 51, maybe 52 years old. Plain gray coat. No shiny jewelry that he could spot except one simple wedding band on a hand that had not held a husband in 11 years. Her hair was pulled back tight, eyes carrying a deep exhaustion that a fat bank account has never cured for anyone. She studied the rough exterior, stared right up at the badly faded sign BRKAUT and TIE. She watched it long enough that Calvin felt a heavy knot form in his gut. Then she finally walked inside his shop. "Mr. Brooks?" "Yes, ma'am." She set a folded paper on the grease-stained counter and slid it forward. "My vehicle registration," she said. Calvin looked down at the sheet. He picked it up and slowly read the whole thing, front and back. He really took his time. He could practically feel Ray Crail standing behind him, burning a massive hole straight through his back. But he took his sweet time anyway. "That is you," he said. "That is me," she replied. "All right, then." He handed the slip right back to her. At that, the corner of Victoria Whitmore's mouth twitched into something that was not exactly a smile, but lived in the same neighborhood. Ray Crail stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitmore." Calvin heard it instantly. He heard the hard shift, heard 52 years of Ray Crail totally evaporate, replaced by a smooth-talking salesman. Ray Crail. Crail Precision directly across the street. 9 bays, factory-certified mechanics, all the latest diagnostic gear. If you need a shop in this area, I do not. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I have no idea what you were told. But this place Ray gestured around, and here it finally came. Here was the one pathetic thing Ray Crail could never stop himself from doing, even with 3 cars and a private security team sitting in the lot. This dirty garage just is not equipped for a luxury vehicle like yours. Calvin is a good old boy. He tries hard, but he has 1 busted lift and 0 scanners. And Mr. Crail?" "Yes, ma'am." "How much do you charge for a standard brake job?" Ray blinked hard. "Well, it depends on a 2009 Buick LaCrosse rear brakes. 74-year-old woman on a fixed income." The shop went dead quiet. Ray's face cycled through about 4 different emotions. That would be, he slowly cleared his throat. That would run in the neighborhood of $600. "And what does he charge?" She did not point at Calvin. She never had to. Ray's coffee cup finally lowered. "He does it for $200. "Why?" "Because he is." Ray suddenly stopped. "Finish it," Victoria spoke quietly. Not loud, not mean. Just a wealthy woman who had sat across from 400 arrogant men exactly like Ray Crail and had never once let a single one leave a sentence half-built. "You started it," Finish it. Because he is what? And Ray Crail, standing inside the very shop he had spent 9 years mocking, in front of a woman whose company insured half the freight trucks in this state, finally answered, sounding just like a guy reading his own obituary because he is soft. Said Victoria Whitmore, and she calmly turned her back on him. Ray just stood there for a second. Then he walked right out into the daylight. Tommy Pike lingered awkwardly by the bay door. Just before stepping out, he caught Calvin's eye, and Calvin would swear to this later. Tommy Pike actually gave him the absolute smallest nod a human being has ever given another human being. Then he was completely gone too. Victoria never even watched them leave. Well, she said, "I have been inside this building 90 seconds, and I already understand the place better than my security team did in 3 whole hours. You did not have to do that. I did not do it for you." Then who did you do it for? She looked right at him. Myself, she admitted. I have had a pretty bad year, Mr. Brooks. Putting him in his place was the most fun I have had in 6 straight months. She had actually brought a car for him to inspect. It was towed in that third vehicle. An old model, which genuinely surprised him, and it kept right on surprising him the whole time he had it in the air. A 1994 Chevrolet C1500. Half-ton red paint faded down to rust with manual windows. A heavy dent marked the driver door, shaped almost exactly like a knee. Calvin paced around the frame twice before speaking a single word. "This is not your truck. It is registered to me." "Ma'am, that is not what I said." He crouched low beside the rear wheel. "You did not buy this truck. Nobody bought this truck. This truck got kept." Victoria Whitmore offered zero answer. 61,000 original miles, and about 40,000 of it is just one road driven over and over. Just look at the tread wear on this tire versus that one. That is somebody driving the exact same 11 miles twice a day for 20 years. He finally stood up. Whose was it? Does it matter? It matters to how I actually fix the thing. She stared at the rusted truck for a long time. It was my father's, she quietly said. Uh-huh. He hauled gravel, ran a pit out past Clarksville. 11 employees most years. Some years just 9. Her tone had definitely changed. It had gotten much flatter. And Calvin, a guy who had spent 15 years listening to folks talk while his head was buried under a hood, knew exactly what a flat voice meant. He drove that Chevy to that pit every single day from 1994 until 2003. And then he suffered a massive stroke right inside the cab sitting in a Hardee's parking lot. He just sat out there for 40 long minutes before anyone finally found him, because he told everyone he was totally fine, and absolutely nobody ever argued with him about anything. I am sorry. Please do not be. He was a very difficult man. She placed her hand flat against the cold fender, the gentle way you might calm a horse. I have kept it in climate-controlled storage for 23 years. My people service it twice a year. They start it up, they change out the oil, they write me a little report, and it has never run right since the day he died. Victoria exhaled not once, not one single day. I have paid. She stopped. I am embarrassed to even tell you what I have paid. Tell me. Somewhere over $90,000. Calvin laughed out loud before he could stop it. 90 grand on a rusted truck worth maybe 4. Yes. To do what, exactly? Just to make it right, Victoria Whitmore replied. And for one brief second, something raw surfaced on that woman's face. A look Calvin instantly recognized from staring into 1,000 different mirrors. Fully rebuilt engine, brand new wiring harness, fresh carburetor. Those mechanics wanted to swap it to fuel injection, and I told them absolutely not. They have replaced every single piece of hardware on it twice over. 3 different shops, 2 of them supposedly the very best in the state. Every single one hands the keys back and swears, "Runs great, ma'am." Then I climb in, I turn the ignition, and she just stopped talking. And it is not it, Calvin said. She stared at him. That is right, she told him quietly. It is not it. Calvin walked around to the driver's side and opened the door. It groaned loud on the hinge, and he stood there a second, listening to that groan. Get in, he said. I am sorry, get in and start it up. I am not going to look at it. I will listen, and then I will tell you exactly what is wrong. Victoria Whitmore, wearing a gray coat that cost more than Calvin's entire furnace, climbed into a rusted-out 1994 Chevrolet. She turned the key. It caught on the second crank and idled. Calvin stood 4 feet away, arms folded, eyes closed tight. He listened for about 12 seconds. Then he told her to shut it off. She killed the engine. Well, she asked, what is wrong with it? Nothing. Excuse me? There's not one thing wrong with that truck, Calvin said. It's the cleanest 94 small block I've heard in 10 years. Whoever did that engine rebuild did it right. I'd be lying to you if I said different. And I don't lie to people about their cars. Victoria kept her hands glued to the wheel. Then why doesn't it sound right? Her voice cracked. It just cracked right down the middle, standing in front of a complete stranger inside a Delford Street garage. Everyone tells me it's fine. Everyone says it's perfect. But I sit in it, and it isn't. And I've started to think I am. Ma'am, they think I'm being sentimental. They think I'm just a crazy woman with a broken truck. Ma'am Victoria. He had never used her first name before, and he never used it again after that day. It's the engine mounts. She stopped. What motor mounts? The rubber ones. Calvin leaned on the heavy door. They pulled that engine to rebuild it. Whoever put it back in used brand new mounts because that's exactly what you do. That is correct. New mounts are stiff. They pass vibrations straight up through the frame and right into the cab. Your daddy's truck had 30-year-old mounts in it. They were half-rotted, soft as a marshmallow, and they soaked all that rattling up. He shrugged. So when you sit in that seat, you are feeling a totally different truck. Same engine, same everything. But it doesn't shake the way it shook when you were 9 years old, just sitting right next to him. Victoria Whitmore did not move a muscle. That is what it is. Calvin said that is the whole $90,000. Nobody told you because every auto shop was measuring it, and there is absolutely no gauge for that. She sat in the truck. She sat there for a really long time. Then she spoke in a voice about the size of a dime. It shook so hard the radio knob would just fall off. Yes, ma'am. He used to catch it without even looking. Her hand slowly went up to the dash. He'd be talking, and he'd just catch it, screw it right back on, and keep talking. Yes, ma'am. Can you fix it? I can put the soft mounts in, Calvin said. Take me a day. Cost you about $110 in parts. But I want you to really hear me because this next part is the important part. Go ahead. It won't be him. The auto shop went dead quiet. It will shake exactly like it shook, Calvin said. And the knob will definitely fall off. And you will drive it out of here, get about 2 miles down the road, and you are going to feel worse than you feel right now. Not better. Because for about 10 seconds, you are going to think he is sitting in that passenger seat. And then you're going to remember he ain't. And that is Calvin's throat worked. That is a thing you cannot undo once you do it, so you better think about it before you tell me yes. Victoria Whitmore looked right up at him. How do you know that? She said, know what? That it gets much worse before it ever gets better. How do you know that? And Calvin Brooks stood in his own garage hearing himself say it out loud to a stranger for the first time in 11 years. Because I kept my wife's car for 2 full years after she passed away. Kept it running perfect, he said. Started it up every single Sunday. And one Sunday I got in, and it smelled just like her. I sat in my own driveway, and I couldn't get out of that car for 2 whole hours. Then my little girl came out and knocked on the window. 4 years old, just knocking on the glass, and that is the last day I ever started it. He wiped his mouth with the back of his heavy hand. Sold it that August. Best $100 I ever lost. Victoria Whitmore's eyes were shining bright. "Put the mounts in," she said. "Ma'am, put the mounts in, Mr. Brooks." "All right," Calvin said. "All right, then." He had the truck up in the air by 11 o'clock. She didn't leave. That was the thing that really got him. She sent 2 of the 3 cars away, told the filing cabinet to wait outside. Then she took off her coat, actually took it off and hung it on a rusty nail in the wall of a cinder block garage. A coat Calvin would later learn cost about $4,000, hanging on a nail he had driven in himself back in 2011, and she sat right down on the stool by the toolbox, the exact one Amara sat on. She watched him work for 3 solid hours. She didn't talk much at first, but then she did. He said something last night she blurted out around noon. "Sienna," she said one other thing before she went upstairs, and I have been chewing on it ever since. What did she say? She said he didn't want anything from me. Victoria turned the stool slowly. And I told her, "Well, that is good, sweetheart." And she looked at me and she said, Victoria stopped talking. Calvin just kept his eyes on the mount bolt. She said, "Do you know how weird that is? That is the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me." Victoria's voice was dead steady, the way voices get when they cost something heavy. "My daughter is 17 years old, and the strangest thing that has ever happened to her in her entire life is a person not wanting anything from her." Calvin didn't say a single word. "You are not going to say anything I am thinking." "About what? About whether you want me to make you feel better, or just tell you the truth?" Calvin said, "Because you can only get one, and I am not going to guess wrong twice in one day." Victoria Whitmore looked at him. "The truth," she said. "All right." Calvin set the wrench down. He came out from under the truck, stood up, and looked her right in the eye. "She drove 11 miles on a bare rim." "I know." "No, ma'am, I don't think you actually do." 11 miles. Sparks flying off the front end, noise like a chainsaw. And she didn't stop. He let that sit. "You know how far 11 miles is at 40 miles an hour? That is 16 minutes. That girl sat in a car for 16 straight minutes with the front end coming apart underneath her, and she didn't even notice. Or she noticed, and she simply didn't care. I have been turning that over since about 10 o'clock last night, and I don't like either one of those answers. And I don't have a third." Victoria Whitmore's face did not flinch. Not one single muscle. Calvin understood right then, watching her, that this was a skill she had built over decades, and right now it was holding up about 400 pounds. "She has a therapist," she said. "Okay." "She has a very good therapist." "Okay." "She has." And then Victoria stopped. Her hand went up over her mouth. She spoke from behind it. "She has a therapist and a driver and a nutritionist and a college counselor, but she does not have anyone to actually call." "No, ma'am. She told you that." "She told me that. She's never told me that." "You are her mother. Calvin said you're the last one she'd ever tell. You're the one it would hurt." And Victoria Whitmore, a woman who ran a company with 4,000 employees, put her face in her hands inside a messy garage on Delford Street. Calvin grabbed her a bottle of water. He set it on the toolbox next to her without saying a word. Then he went back under the truck and left her alone. He had learned a long time ago that the kindest thing you can do for a person coming apart is give them something to hold on to, and just quit looking at them. After a while, she spoke thickly. "This is the exact same thing you did to her." "Yes, ma'am." "It works, doesn't it?" "It is just water," Calvin said. "No, it isn't." At 2:20, he dropped the truck off the lift. She was standing there before the tires even touched the ground. "Do you want to start it?" he asked. "No, ma'am. You start it," Victoria said. "I want to hear it from out here first. I'm not," she swallowed hard, "I'm not ready to be inside it." So Calvin Brooks climbed into a dead man's truck and turned the key. It caught on the second crank, and it shook. It shook the entire cab. A low, ugly, beautiful rumble that came straight up through the floorboards into the seat and rattled the glass in the door. And up on the dashboard, the radio knob shivered off its post and just dropped. And Calvin caught it without even looking. Right hand flashing off the seat, the way you catch something you have caught 1,000 times, except he had never caught it once in his entire life. He looked up. Victoria Whitmore was standing in the doorway of his auto shop with her hand over her mouth. 11 years and about $100 million coming completely apart in her face. He shut the engine off. He got out. He set the knob in her palm and folded her fingers over it. She stood there shaking way harder than the truck had. He kept his hands to himself. He just stayed near her. Close enough so she wasn't totally alone in that garage, but far enough back to let her keep her dignity. After 15 years running an auto repair business, he knew that was the exact distance folks needed. There is no manual for that. It took about 4 minutes. Finally, she straightened up. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist like a kid and let out one furious, wet laugh. "Well," she said, "damn you." "Yes, ma'am. You warned me things would get worse." "I sure did, and you were absolutely right. I usually am about that kind of thing." She stared down at the hardware in her hand and asked what she owed him. $110 for the mounts and the labor. "There is no labor, Mr. Brooks. There is no labor," Calvin repeated. "And I would take it pretty kindly if you didn't fight me on this. I already had that exact fight once this week with your daughter, and I won. I would really hate to break my winning streak." Victoria Whitmore stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Then she dropped a sentence that changed the entire shape of the room. "You have a lien on this building." Calvin closed his face like a steel door. $18,240, she said. 23 days. I need you to leave right now, Mr. Brooks." "Ma'am, I mean it." His voice never rose. It dropped lower, and that was worse. "You pull a checkbook out inside my garage, and I swear before God I will put your daddy's truck right back on that lift. I will swap the old hard mounts back and hand you the keys, and we will call it even." "You would not." "Try me." So they just stood there. A grease-stained mechanic with $41 and a corporate boss with 4,000 employees, staring each other down across a cracked concrete floor. Victoria Whitmore never reached for her checkbook. She reached deep into her coat, the one hanging off the nail, and pulled out her phone. She locked eyes with Calvin and asked if she could pose one single question. Depends on the question. "How many fleet trucks can you service in a week?" Calvin froze. "What?" "It is a pretty straightforward question. If you had the extra bays, the lifts, and a second or third mechanic, how many commercial vehicles could you push through this garage in a single week? Doing it at your standard with your name slapped on it. And Mr. Brooks, think hard before you answer, because I'm going to hold you to the number." Calvin Brooks stood perfectly still in his own garage. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "what exactly are you asking me here?" "I have 406 vehicles operating in this state," Victoria Whitmore replied. "Vans, box trucks, service pickups. Right now. They are all maintained through a national contract costing me $2.4 million a year, and I have 300 pages of formal complaints. I've spent 18 long months trying to break that deal." She held her phone up. "So no, I will not hand you $18,000, Mr. Brooks. I do not do that. I have never done that for anyone, and I am not starting today." "Then what I am going to ask you to bid," she said. Out behind her across the street, through 9 bright glass bays, Ray Cray stood at his window. He was watching a woman he called Ma'am stand inside Calvin Brooks's shop for a 4th straight hour. "Bid," Calvin repeated. "Bid on what on the contract?" Victoria slipped her phone back into her coat pocket. $2.4 million a year. Mr. Brooks, I am putting it up for open bid in 14 days. 6 different firms, national, regional. And if you put together a proposal that does not embarrass either of us. Calvin just laughed. It was not a nice laugh. Ma'am, I have one lift. I am aware. I have one lift, one mechanic, and 23 days before a bank seizes the building this lift is bolted to. I am fully aware of that too. Then what in God's name? He stopped himself, rubbed his tired face, and started again, slower. Do you understand what you are doing right now? You are standing inside a failing shop, telling a drowning man to go enter a swimming contest. Yes, that is incredibly cruel. It might be. Victoria Whitmore just looked at him. I have been called a lot worse and still been right. Mr. Brooks, listen to me carefully. I am about to tell you something that absolutely no one in my company would allow me to say if they stood in this room. She took a slow step toward him. If I write you a check today, do you know what actually happens? I get to keep my building. You keep your building for exactly 11 months. Then you are right back here. A check does not fix the core problem. The issue is not $18,000. The issue is you charge $200 for a $600 repair. You've built a business that only survives if you never sleep. A quick check just delays the inevitable, and you would hate me for the rest of your life, and you would be right to. And a bid I cannot win is somehow better. A bid you can win with just one lift. Mr. Brooks, do you know why I am firing my current fleet vendor? She didn't wait. 6 weeks ago, one of my box trucks flew off the interstate outside Memphis. Total brake failure. The driver's name was Denny Alvarado. He was 59. He had been with our company for 19 years, and he has a wife and a grandson. He walked away from that wreck. He walked away strictly because he was lucky. That is it. The only reason. When we pulled the maintenance records, that truck had been signed off, initialed and dated by a technician who never even touched it. There is a name right in the box, yet that man was down in Nashville that day. We have it on camera. He was 200 miles from that truck. Calvin went completely still. $2.4 million a year, Victoria said. And I am just buying signatures. That is all I am buying. 9 bays a scanner and the man who signs a box. Ma'am, I do not need bays, Mr. Brooks. I can build bays. Bays are just a simple purchase order. I've been trying for 18 months to buy the one single thing that is not for sale anywhere. And yesterday, it changed my daughter's tire in the pouring rain for free. The garage was so quiet, Calvin could hear the air compressor ticking as it cooled down. You still have to bid, she told him. You have to bid, and you have to win it in a boardroom against 5 other firms and my CFO, who is absolutely going to hate you on sight. Because if I just hand this contract over, every single person in my company will know it was a gift. They will spend the next 2 years just waiting for you to fail. But if you earn it in that room, they will never be able to say a single word. Calvin stared down at the long crack in his concrete floor. 14 days. 14 days. I do not know how to write a business proposal. No, Victoria agreed. You definitely do not. I have never written one in my entire life. I write estimates on the back of envelopes. That is my whole system. Envelopes and a spiral notebook. Then you have 14 days to learn. And the bank is not my business, Victoria Whitmore interrupted. Calvin's head snapped up sharp, and she met his eyes dead level. It isn't my problem. It is yours. You want me to swoop in and fix it, but I won't. Because the very minute I do that, you become my employee. And I really do not want an employee. I already have 4,000 of those. I want a trusted vendor. A vendor is a man who can look me dead in the face and tell me no. She grabbed her heavy coat right off the nail. Mr. Brooks, my father, borrowed $19,000 in 1979 from a bank that did not want to give it to him. I have thought about that exact number my entire life. It is not a lot of money, but it was absolutely everything. And nobody handed it to him either. She paused right at the garage door. 23 days is a very long time when you are not sleeping. She was almost out when Calvin finally spoke up. "Why did you really come here?" She stopped walking. "Just to thank you," she replied. "You could have easily mailed a card." Victoria Whitmore stood there in the doorway of a cinder-block garage, the sound of her father's old truck idling loudly in her ears. "My daughter came home last night and looked at me. She said exactly the way she used to look at me when she was just 6 years old. It lasted for about 4 seconds, and I would burn my entire company straight to the ground to get 4 more. And then she left." Calvin stood frozen for a full minute after the cars finally pulled out. Then he walked slowly over to the counter, picked up his cheap spiral notebook, and flipped right to a clean page. He wrote at the top in neat block letters, exactly the way his father had taught him to fill out a work order. He stared at it. Then he wrote underneath it, 406 vehicles. He just looked at that. Then he slumped down on the stool his daughter usually sat on. He buried his face in both hands and admitted out loud to an empty shop, "I do not know how to do this." That was 3:15 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. At 3:35, Amara got off the school bus. She walked in, tossed her heavy backpack into the corner, and instantly froze. Her father was sitting on her stool, holding a notebook. That had never happened, not once in her entire life. "Dad." "Hey, baby. Why are you sitting down like that?" "Because I am thinking." "You do not think sitting down. You think lying under a car." "Well, today I am thinking sitting down." He patted the heavy workbench. "Come here. I need to ask you something, and I want the real answer, not the nice one." Amara hopped up. "You know how you always say this shop is a safe place?" "Yeah." "If it got bigger, would it still be?" She frowned right at him. "How much bigger?" "A whole lot bigger. Say 6 bays. Say I brought on 3 or 4 men. Picture trucks rumbling in and out all day long, and I wasn't the guy turning every single wrench. Would you still be around every single day then?" "Yeah." She just shrugged. "It is not the building, Dad. It is you." Calvin stared down at his 8-year-old. "How do you know that?" "Because Miss Marlene does not come here for the building." Amara spoke with that withering patience of a kid explaining rain to a grown man. "Have you actually seen this building?" And Calvin Brooks laughed so hard he literally had to drop his notebook. He got 0 sleep that night either, but it was a completely different kind of awake. By 11 p.m., he sat at the kitchen table with the notebook and a dusty calculator from 2006. At 1 a.m., he had not moved an inch. 2 a.m. He got up, leaned in Amara's doorway, and just watched her sleep for a good while. Then he dragged himself back to the chair. By 4, he finally had solid numbers. 406 vehicles. Preventive maintenance every 90 days means 4 visits a year. That is 1,624 service events. Call it a 90-minute average. Some long, some short, with brakes and tires piled on top. He crunched it 3 times, got 3 completely different answers. Then he ran it a 4th time, speaking slow, out loud, exactly how you check torque. 14,600 labor hours a year. He stared at that figure until his vision blurred. Then he wrote underneath, "I have 1 lift and 2 hands." Below that, "Need 6 bays, 5 techs, service software. I do not own insurance, cannot afford it, and the bank is taking this building in exactly 22 days. And under that, because he was a Brooks, and Robert Brooks raised him to never leave a math column without a total, he simply wrote, "Start anyway." At 6:10 a.m., he shoved the shop doors wide open. 6:40, he dialed Tommy Pike. Tommy answered on the 4th ring, keeping his voice to a whisper. "Mr. Brooks?" "Tommy, you at work?" "I am out in the parking lot. I got maybe 4 minutes. How much does Ray pay you? Dead silence. Tommy mumbled, 18 an hour. How many hours? Whatever he says. 60 sometimes. Does he pay you overtime? A much longer pause. Tommy, he calls it salary. Tommy Pike admitted he started calling it salary back in April. Calvin squeezed his eyes shut tight. Come see me, he warned. Not today, and not where Ray can spot you. Saturday. My house, 7 in the morning. I will cook. Do not say yes right now. Mr. Brooks, do not say yes right now, Tommy. Go inside. Think about it. 2 days. He hung up. Over the next 3 days, he made 40 more phone calls. That is the part nobody ever warns you about, simply because there is zero drama to it. Just a desperate guy freezing in a garage, hearing the word no. The equipment supplier demanded 40% down on new lifts. The software outfit required a 2-year contract, plus a commercial credit score he completely lacked. The insurance broker literally laughed out loud into the receiver. Commercial fleet liability, sir. With your current revenue, you would need a bond. Do you even know what a bond is? Yes, I know what a bond is. Then you know. Next, he called the bank. Gordon Veeder took it to his credit. Mr. Brooks, Gordon, I need 30 more days. I cannot do 30. Listen, I have a shot at a $2.4 million contract. Heavy pause. Calvin could actually hear the man's entire personality wrestling with itself over the line. Do you have that in writing? Veeder asked. No. Do you happen to have a letter of intent? No. Do you have absolutely anything I could put into a file? I have a woman's word. Who is Victoria Whitmore? The dead air on that one dragged on forever. Mr. Brooks, Veeder finally said, choosing his words carefully. I want to be delicate here. Do not be. If I take this upstairs, they are going to think you are... He stopped himself. Say it. They are going to think you are unwell, Veeder admitted. That is exactly what they will think. A guy 20 days from foreclosure calls up claiming a billionaire is about to swoop in and save him. Do you understand how that sounds from this side of the desk? Yeah, Calvin sighed. I do. I am really sorry. I know you are, Gordon. That is what makes it worse. Ray Crail found out on Friday. Calvin never learned exactly how, though he had a solid guess involving khakis and a Thursday tea time. Ray marched across the street at 4 p.m. He was not holding his usual coffee. That was how Calvin instantly knew. You are bidding. Calvin kept his head under the hood. Word travels fast. You are bidding on the Whitmore fleet. Ray, I have a customer's car here, with one single lift. Ray's voice echoed hard off the cold cinder block. Cal, are you out of your damn mind? I have 9 bays. I have a factory scanner. I have a bond. And I have been fighting for a piece of that fleet for 4 years. 4 years. Sent them a massive proposal in 2022. They did not even bother mailing a rejection letter. Just absolute silence. Then she strolls into your little dump and hangs out for 4 hours. And now you are bidding. Calvin slowly pulled himself out from under the hood. That is right. Ray just stared. Then something happened that Calvin definitely did not expect. Ray Crail's face did something it had not done in 9 straight years. It completely came apart just for a split second right down the middle. And what hid underneath was not anger. It was pure fear. You know what I have tied up in that building? Ray asked quietly. $1.1 million. That is what I have in it. And none of it is actually mine, Cal. Not 1 cent. I owe every single nickel. 9 bays. 9 bays. And I need 40 cars a week pushing through them, just to make the monthly note. And there are not 40 cars a week in this entire town. There are 20. I have been fighting you for those 20 for 9 years. Ray, I built that place facing you. Ray let out an awful, hollow laugh. You know those 16-foot bays I put the glass on this side on purpose? Everyone thinks it was to look down on you. It was not. It was so I could watch you. Because I could not figure out how a guy with one rusted lift and zero signage was taking food right off my family's table. Calvin said nothing. $200, Ray muttered. A brake job for $200. Do you know what that does to me? I cannot do it for $200. I have payroll to meet. I have a massive banknote. If I charged $200, I would be bankrupt in a year. So you doing it makes me look like the crook. Every single time a customer sits in my waiting room, they sit there thinking, Calvin would have done this for $2. That is not on me, Ray. Then who is it on? And there it was, out in the open air at last. 9 years of resentment standing right there in the garage. Calvin slowly set his wrench down. It is on the simple fact that I do not have a note, he said quietly. I do not have 9 bays. I have a paid-off building my daddy bought in 1988 and a lift from 1994, and I have never taken a vacation. That is how that is, the entire trick, Ray. There is no magic trick here. I can charge $200 because I do not owe anybody except the bank. And now I owe the bank. In 20 days, I am going to be gone, and you will finally have your 20 cars. And you know what? You still will not make the note anyway, because those 20 cars were never the actual problem. Do not. Somebody has to say it. Don't you dare. Ray, they do not come to me for the price. Calvin shook his head. They come to me because when Marlene Ellis walks into your lobby, you look straight at her hip. You stare at her hip and her coin purse, and you run the math on exactly what she can be talked into buying. And she feels that. Everybody feels that. That is your real problem. You built a massive 9-bay shop and put a man inside it who cannot stop counting money. Ray Crail just stood there in Calvin Brooks's garage, his bare hands slowly opening and closing. You are going to lose, he finally rasped. You know for a fact you will lose the bid and lose this building. Then I will buy this lot at auction for 40 cents on the dollar and pave a giant parking lot right over it. I want you to know I will be thinking about this exact conversation the entire time. I know you will, Calvin said softly. That is your other problem. Ray headed out the door. Then he stopped, turned back, and dropped a line that made Calvin's stomach run ice cold. He said it in a completely different voice, flat calm, almost corporate, a tone Ray Crail had never once used before. Your girl rides the bus with mine. Calvin instantly pushed off the fender. What did you just say? I am just making conversation. Ray, listen to me. I did not say a thing, Cal. Ray held up both hands, palms facing out, flashing a cold smile. I did not say one thing. Have a good weekend. Tommy Pike showed up Saturday at 7 a.m. He hovered on the porch in a jacket way too thin for the weather, refusing to look up. Come inside, Tommy. I cannot stay. Come in and eat, Tommy. It is 28 degrees out here. He finally walked in. Amara slid a plate across the table before he even asked. Tommy Pike just stared down at the hot food like no one had served him a decent meal in an entire year. Honestly, they probably hadn't. Calvin let him finish eating before opening his mouth. You learn to do that. Tommy, how long have you been stuck at Cray? 6 years. You a good mechanic? I do all right. That is not what I asked you. Tommy dropped his fork. I am the absolute best tech in that building, he snapped. The words spilled out fast like they had been jammed behind his teeth for 6 whole years. I am the only guy there reading the service bulletins. I fix Dale's screw-ups twice a week, and Ray never knows. I keep quiet because Dale has a little kid. Then why are you making $18 an hour on a garbage salary? Tommy looked away. Tell me, Tommy. Because he actually hired me when nobody else would even look. Tommy's voice cracked. I have a record. I was 20 years old. It was a stupid look. It doesn't matter what it was. I did 9 months. Put in applications at 11 different shops. Ray is the only guy who called back, and he never lets me forget it. Not one single day in 6 years. He does not even have to say it out loud anymore. He just stares at me. The kitchen went dead quiet. 6 days a week, Tommy muttered. 60 hours and the boss calls it a salary? Every time I open my mouth to complain, he just smiles. Tommy, who else is going to take you? He looked up, eyes red and completely furious. And you want to know the absolute worst part, Mr. Brooks? The bastard is right. Who else is ever going to take me? Calvin studied him. Me, he said. Tommy let out a harsh laugh. You are going under. Probably. Everybody in this town knows your shop is completely sinking. Yep. Then what are you actually offering me? Honest to God, what is this? Calvin stood up, grabbed the cheap spiral notebook off his kitchen counter, dropped it on the table, and spun it around. That right there is what I am offering. Tommy stared at the pages. Numbers, columns, 406 vehicles. What is this? 14,600 labor hours a year if I win, which I probably will not. Win what? The Whitmore Fleet contract. Tommy leaned back hard. You are serious. $24 an hour, Calvin said smoothly. That is the offer. 24 time and a half over 40 hours. Every single hour goes on a punch card. The card goes in my desk drawer. I will not call it a fake salary. Health insurance in 6 months if my doors are still open. And Tommy. Calvin leaned across the table. Nobody in my shop ever signs off on a truck they did not personally inspect. Not once. Never going to happen. That is the entire shop policy. One single rule, and that is it. You do not even have the contract yet. Nope. You do not even own the building past the 15th. No, you have absolutely nothing. Tommy Calvin said quietly, I have 20 days and a spiral notebook, and I am asking you to quit your job to follow a man who might be bankrupt by Christmas. I know exactly what I am asking here. It is completely insane. I would tell my own daughter to walk away. Tommy Pike just kept staring at the notebook. Why me? He asked. Because you refused to take Ray's bet. Tommy snapped his head up. Thursday night, Calvin said softly. Out in the pouring rain. He stood at the window betting $20 I would not charge that girl for a tire, and you refused the bet. I saw both of you from the parking lot, Tommy, clear as crystal. Your hands were jammed in your pockets, and you looked physically sick watching it. Calvin shrugged his shoulders. A guy who turns down an easy $20 because the wager is just too ugly. That is the entire job interview. That tells me everything. Tommy Pike buried his face in his rough hands. He will ruin me, he whispered. You know Ray will call every auto shop in 3 counties just to drag my record up. Yeah, he will. So if you tank, I have nothing left. That is right. Tommy laughed helplessly. Mr. Brooks, that is the absolute worst offer anybody has ever handed me. It is the only honest one, Calvin replied. That is all I have. Tommy Pike sat frozen in that kitchen for 30 seconds. Then he looked up. Monday morning, 6:15. He stood up on shaking legs, shoving his trembling hand across the table anyway. And Mr. Brooks, I want the 24 and the overtime in writing. I want it on actual paper with your signature on it. Not because I doubt you. His jaw clenched tight. I just need to see it. Just one time in my miserable life, I need to see the promise written down. Calvin grabbed a pen. He scribbled the terms on the back of a torn envelope, a bank foreclosure notice, ironically, since it was just sitting there, and he signed his name. Tommy Pike carefully folded that envelope 4 times. He tucked it deep into his chest pocket, right over his heart, and he never took it out again for the rest of his life. Monday, they got to work. Tuesday, Ray Cray called 11 rival shops across 3 counties. Wednesday morning, Marlene Ellis marched into the garage, clutching her coin purse. Calvin, honey, I heard a rumor down at the Kroger. Miss Marlene, I heard you were bidding on the Whitmore fleet trucks. She slammed her little purse on the counter and snapped it open. Calvin felt his stomach drop straight into the concrete floor because he knew exactly what was about to happen. No, ma'am. Calvin Brooks, you do not even know what. Miss Marlene put it away. It is $410. She said it fast, like she had been rehearsing in her car. It is from my sister's life insurance payout in 2019. I kept it hidden in a coffee can for years, never touched a single dime. I am 74 years old, and I simply do not need it. And if you bring up my bad hip, I swear I will hit you with this purse. Calvin Brooks stood frozen behind his shop counter, totally unable to speak. You put new brakes on my sedan? Marlene Ellis said, and you refused to take my $30. I sat at my kitchen table that night and I cried, Calvin, and I am not a crier. So you are going to take this cash, or I will come down here every single day and make a massive scene. I have nothing but time. Miss Marlene, please take it back. I cannot. Why not? Because it is $400, Calvin said heavily. I owe $18,240. It will not make a dent. It will not do anything except steal your sister's memory. Marlene Ellis stared right up at him. She spoke in a fierce, ragged tone he had never heard her use before. That is not for you to decide. She shoved the money onto his counter. You've been deciding what people are allowed to give you for 15 straight years. Every single one of us, you decide, and we just sit there and take your charity and say thank you. You never once let anybody carry the weight back the other way. Do you know how that feels, Calvin? To be a person who can only ever take. Calvin pressed both hands flat against the cold countertop. No, ma'am, he said quietly. I really do not. Well, she violently snapped her purse shut. Now you do. She turned and marched right out. Calvin Brooks stood alone, staring at $410 sitting on his counter, and cried for the second time in 11 years. And Tommy Pike, God bless the man, stayed underneath the truck and never looked up once. Thursday afternoon, the phone rang. Unknown number. He had actually started answering those lately. Mr. Brooks, this is Sienna. Calvin sank into his desk chair. Hey there. Is it okay that I called you? My mom's assistant had the shop number. I didn't. Hey, it is fine. I just wanted to say thank you. I did not say it right the other night. I tried, but I was. She paused. I was just a total mess. You were fine. I was absolutely not fine. No, Calvin admitted. You weren't. She let out a laugh. It sounded better than last time. How is the tire I got, a real one, put on at some shop? Took 45 minutes and cost $900. And the mechanic called me sweetheart in a way that made my skin crawl. Heavy pause. You called me sweetheart. I did. It was just different with you. Yeah. Anyway, Mr. Brooks. Her voice shifted, and Calvin felt his stomach knot up because he recognized that tone from a rainy parking lot. My mom mentioned your contract bid, and she said you refused her money. That is completely between me and your mother. Well, she is going to fight for you, Sienna pushed on. In the boardroom, she will not admit it, but she is. I overheard her arguing with Mr. Denworth. He is the chief financial officer. 22 years at the company, and he said she stopped short. Say it. He told her, Victoria, if you hand $2.4 million to a one-bay garage just because your kid got a flat tire, the board will completely have your head, and they will be right. Calvin squeezed his eyes shut. She told him you were going to bid just like everyone else. And Mr. Denworth said, then he will lose exactly like everyone else, and at least it will be quick. Calvin sat alone in his garage, pressing the phone hard against his ear. Sweetheart, he breathed. Can I tell you something true? Yeah. Denworth is right. Please do not say that. I have one hydraulic lift, 11 days, and a mechanic named Tommy. Calvin sighed. That is my entire company. Your mom's CFO is not some villain. He is just a guy doing basic arithmetic, and the math says I lose. I would say the exact same thing if I sat in his leather chair. Then why are you even trying? Calvin stared at a deep crack in the concrete. Because my kid told me this auto shop is a safe place, he muttered. And that is the only true thing anybody has said about me in 15 years. I just want to find out if that is actually worth anything in a room where they keep score. Dead silence on the phone. Then Sienna Whitmore spoke up, keeping her voice dead low. 9 days. The bids happen in 9 days, and Mr. Brooks, they are absolutely not letting you present last. They bumped you to first. I spotted the printout on the counter. You are up at 8 a.m. sharp. The big national firms get 11 a.m., right after coffee and pastries at 10:30. Calvin froze in his chair. Say that again. You are first, Sienna told him, before anyone is even awake. My mom has no idea. Denworth built this agenda. Calvin Brooks just stared up at the shop ceiling and very slowly broke into a smile. Tommy Pike spotted that look from underneath a heavy-duty chassis. Years later, he would tell anyone who would listen that this was the exact second he finally stopped being afraid. Sweetheart Calvin told her, "Do me a favor and text me that agenda." He never slept that night, and for once it was not the arithmetic keeping him awake. 2 a.m. found him at the kitchen table. His phone sat face up next to a worn spiral notebook. He read the schedule for the 9th time. Brooks Auto and Tire at 8 a.m. for 20 minutes. Fleet Core National at 11 a.m. for 60 minutes. Crail Precision Automotive at 1:30 p.m. for 45 minutes. He stared at that final line twice. Then he slapped the phone face down and muttered out loud to an empty room, "Well, hell." Tommy Pike heard the news at 6:20 the next morning and immediately had to sit down on an oil drum. He is actually bidding. Ray is in that room. He gets 1:30. I get 8. Tommy gripped the top of his head tightly. Mr. Brooks, he is going to know I am working with you. The second I step into that lobby, he is going to know. Then do not step into the lobby, Calvin shot back. I am not letting you go in there alone. No way. Tommy Pike shouted it so hard his voice bounced off the cinder block walls, surprising them both. No, sir. 6 long years. I kept my mouth completely shut inside that building for 6 years. I am not about to sit in this garage in the 15th and just read about it. Calvin studied him for a long moment. 20 minutes, Calvin said. That is all they gave me. 20 minutes at 8 a.m. before anyone even touches a coffee. Meanwhile, Ray gets 45 minutes at 1:30 when they are stuffed with lunch. You realize what that means? It means they already made their choice. It means 20 minutes is a knife, Calvin told him, and 45 minutes is a victory speech. Nobody ever gets talked into a damn thing in 20 minutes. But you can easily get cut in 20. Tommy just stared at him. You are actually enjoying this. No, Calvin replied, but I stopped being scared of it, and from the outside, those two feelings look pretty much the same. 9 days left. The very first move he made was the one nobody saw coming. For 3 straight days, he did not write down a single word for the pitch. He just drove. He took Marlene Ellis and her $410 because he had finally accepted the cash. It burned inside his shirt pocket like a live coal. He pumped it straight into the gas tank of his pickup, drove out to the Whitmore distribution yard off Route 9 at 4:30 in the morning, parked across the road, and just waited. By 5 a.m., the drivers started rolling in. Calvin stepped out and walked over, carrying 2 boxes of donuts and a heavy thermos. The first guy to reach him was pushing 60. He gave Calvin that hard, suspicious stare reserved for door-to-door salesmen. Can I help you? Probably not, Calvin answered. You Denny Alvarado? The man stopped walking. Who is asking Calvin Brooks? I fix cars down on Delford Street. That does not answer my question. No, sir, it does not. Calvin held out the donuts. I am bidding on your fleet maintenance contract. I would be a complete liar if I said I was not standing here for a very specific reason. So, there is your honest answer. I brought breakfast, and I would love 15 minutes of your morning. If you tell me to get back in my truck and leave, I will drive away and never say a word. Denny Alvarado studied him for a long moment. You're the guy from the garage, he finally said. With the girl. Calvin blinked hard. How do you know that, mister? There are 400 commercial drivers in this company, and maybe 9 of us ever have anything interesting to talk about. Denny grabbed a glazed donut. You want 15 minutes? You got 'em. But let me tell you right now, 3 vendors have shown up out here in 19 years, and every single one of them brought a clipboard. I do not own a clipboard. I noticed. By 6 a.m., 11 guys were huddled around Calvin's tailgate. By 6:30, that grew to 19. And Calvin Brooks did not pitch himself once. He asked questions. That was his entire play. He stood there with a spiral notebook and simply asked the guys what was wrong with their trucks. Then something happened he never planned for. Something he never forgot. The men would not stop talking. Truck number 2 gets a shimmy at 55. Been warning them for 2 years. 2 whole years. They write it up. No fault found. Every single time. No fault found. Do they even drive it? Do they what? Do they actually test drive the rig when you write it up? Does a technician climb up in that cab and push it to 55 on the open highway? The drivers just looked at each other. Mr. Somebody muttered they do not even start half of them. Calvin slowly looked up from his notebook. Say that again. They pull it into the bay, they pop the hood, they slap the sticker on. 15 minutes, tops. I have watched them do it. 15 minutes. 12 one time. I timed it because I was mad. And they charge for that. Calvin flipped a page. They bill your company $480 a unit for a 90-day maintenance check. 19 men went completely quiet. Denny Alvarado spoke very slowly. How much did you say? Yeah, $480 for 12 minutes of work. And Calvin Brooks stood in that gravel lot at dawn, understanding in one crystal-clear moment that he was not bidding against Fleet Corps National. He was bidding against a massive lie that had been running totally unchallenged for 6 years. Mr. Alvarado. Calvin said, "Can I ask you something? And I need the raw truth here, not the polite version." Go ahead and ask. That wreck outside Memphis? Denny immediately closed off his face. That is done. Yes, sir. I know it is. They gave me 3 weeks off and a get well card. The whole yard signed it. I'm not asking about the damn card. Calvin put the notebook down on the tailgate, closed the cover, and pressed his hand flat against it. I am asking about before it happened. Did you write it up? The lot went so quiet you could hear the interstate a whole mile off. Denny Alvarado just stood frozen with a donut in his hand. 4 times, he said. Say it again. I wrote that truck up 4 times in 5 months. Denny did not raise his voice at all. It just got incredibly level, which was somehow much worse. Soft pedal, long pedal. I wrote bad brakes on a green maintenance card and shoved it in the wall box 4 different times. And 4 separate times a fresh sticker came back that clearly said, serviced. Then came the 5th time. I was doing 62 miles an hour coming down the steep grade at Millington. The brake pedal went straight to the floorboards, and I put the whole rig into a ditch. And when I crawled out of that cab, Mr. You-Know-What, I thought, standing out there in the high weeds, my hands violently shaking. What? I thought. They're going to blame this entirely on me. 19 grown men stood in a cold parking lot at dawn, and not a single one moved a muscle. 19 years, Denny whispered. 19 years of driving and a grandson, and I am standing in a ditch terrified they will claim I rode the brakes. That is exactly what this company turned me into. Calvin Brooks stared at the man for a long, heavy time. Then he finally spoke. Mr. Alvarado, I am going to ask you for something. It is a massive thing, and you can absolutely say no. What? 9 days from now, I have exactly 20 minutes in a room with the people who signed that check. Calvin grabbed his spiral notebook. I do not have fancy slides. I do not run a corporate firm. I have one lift and a man named Tommy. What I want, if you are willing, is for you to tell them exactly what you just told me. Denny Alvarado laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. They are never going to let a driver into that room. No, Calvin agreed. They are not. Then what? So you would have to walk in there with me? Calvin said. He just walked away. Ray Cray finally put the pieces together on day 5. He walked across the street to the garage at 4 in the afternoon. He did not yell, and that was exactly how Calvin knew this was going to get bad. You went down to the yard. I did. You went to the yard and you talked to the drivers. Ray sounded almost admiring. Almost. That is something, Cal. I really have to hand it to you. That is a hell of a move. It is the only move you had, and you found it. I have been in this game 9 years, and I never thought of it once. That is the difference between us, Ray. No, it is not. Ray just smiled. The actual difference between us is I have a corporate bond, and you just have a gut feeling. He casually shoved his hands deep into his pockets. You know what I did today? Calvin just waited. I called Whitmore's compliance office, Ray said. Very nice lady, very thorough woman. I casually mentioned there is a bidder in the applicant pool who currently employs a convicted felon, and I just wondered if that squared with their strict vendor policy, considering their fleet drives on federal highways. Tommy Pike slid out from under the truck so fast, he scraped raw skin right off his knuckles. You son of a Tommy. Calvin did not even look at him. Get back under the truck. He did what? Get back under the truck, Tommy. Tommy did not move a muscle. Ray looked right at him, his face going soft and absolutely terrible. Tommy, he said, I gave you a job when you had absolutely nothing. Nothing. Not a single soul in this county would touch you. And I put you in a service bay. I fed your family for 6 years, and this is? He pointed around the shop. You did not even tell me. 6 whole years, and you did not have the guts to look me in the eye and say it. And Tommy Pike, 26 years old, with an envelope folded 4 times inside his shirt pocket, spoke up. You never once said my name, Ray. Ray froze. What? 6 years. Tommy's entire body was shaking now. You called me Pike. You called me Kid. You called me my guy. You never actually said Tommy. Not one single time. He said it inside of 9 seconds, and he cooked me eggs. Ray just looked at him. That is what this is, he said. Eggs. Yeah, Ray, Tommy replied. That is exactly what this is. Ray turned to Calvin, and his voice dropped back into that flat, purely business tone, the exact tone that made Calvin's stomach go ice cold. Compliance is going to call you. Probably Monday, I would imagine. And Cal Ray started walking across the gravel, then suddenly stopped. That bank paper on the 15th. That is 4 days after the fleet bid. I know exactly when it is. So even if you walk into that boardroom and deliver the greatest 20 minutes in the history of the world, Ray spread his hands wide. They cannot give a $2.4 million contract to a company that does not even own a building. There is not a CFO alive who would sign that. You know that, right? You know that. Calvin said nothing at all. That is what I mean about you, Ray said almost gently. You think being right is the exact same thing as winning. It is not. It never has been. Not one single day in the history of this country. And he walked right back across the street to his 9 bright service bays. Compliance called on Monday morning. The woman was perfectly polite and pleasant, asking in the flat tone of somebody reading a laminated card whether Brooks Auto and Tire employed any individual with a felony conviction in a role with access to fleet assets.
Yes, ma'am,
Calvin told her. Just one. A heavy pause hung on the line. I am sorry, you are confirming that. Ma'am, you asked me a question. Do you want the answer, or do you want me to dance, Mr. Brooks?
Most vendors would just say they will look into it and call back on Thursday.
Calvin cut in. His name is Thomas Pike. He is 26. He served 9 months when he was 20 years old. He is hands down the best mechanic in this county, and the only man I would let put brakes on a truck my daughter rides behind. If that disqualifies me, then disqualify me. But do it today so I can just get back to work. A very long pause followed.
Mr. Brooks?
The woman said, her voice completely losing that laminated script feel. Off the record, I've made 200 of these calls. Nobody has ever once just said yes. The night before the big meeting, he could not eat a thing. Amara sat right across from him, pushing her food around, watching him not eat his. Finally, she spoke up. Dad, you are going to throw up. I just might. Are you scared? Yeah, Calvin admitted quietly. I am. She slowly put her fork down. She had never heard him say that before. You want to hear something? He leaned forward. When I was 23 years old, I broke down outside Knoxville with your mama in the passenger seat and exactly $11 in my pocket, and a man stopped. Did I ever tell you that? 100 times, she said. Right. He pushed his plate away. Well, here is the part I never told you. That night, after Earl fixed the water pump, refused to take a dime and drove off, your mama sat right there in that car and told me, Cal, that is the kind of man I want you to be. He looked down at his rough hands, and I said, baby, that man has a tow truck, a paved driveway, and a house. I have $11. And she said, he stopped. What did she say? She told me he did not have any of that in 1971 either. Amara did not say a word. 15 whole years I have been chewing on that, Calvin said softly. And tomorrow at 8 in the morning I get exactly 20 minutes to find out if she was right. She was right. You do not know that baby. Dad. Amara Brooks looked at her father across the kitchen table. Mama was right about everything. You told me that yourself. He got to the lobby at 6:40 for an 8 o'clock slot. Denny Alvarado was already waiting in the lobby. So was Tommy Pike, wearing a collared shirt, sitting nervously on the edge of a chair like a man in a hospital waiting room. And so were 4 other fleet drivers. Calvin froze in the doorway. Denny, do not start. Denny, I only asked for one. Yeah, well. Denny Alvarado stood up. Word got around the yard. They will fire you, mister. We talked about that out in the yard for an hour last night. Denny just shrugged. You want to know what we came up with? Not a single one of us has said a true word in this building in 19 years. Figured we would try it just once and see what it actually costs. At 7:58, a woman walked out and announced that they were ready for Mr. Brooks. Calvin stood up. Then he sat right back down, dropping his head for about 4 seconds. Tommy Pike heard him whisper, very quietly, All right, Daniel. Then he got up and walked into the boardroom. There were 9 people sitting around the massive table, including Victoria Whitmore down at the far end. She refused to look at him, and Calvin understood immediately that she had been ordered not to. The man sitting in the middle stood up. Harold Denworth, the chief financial officer. He did not even bother offering his hand. Mr. Brooks, before we start today, I want to be entirely transparent with you because I consider it a kindness. Do you have any idea why you are on this agenda? Yes, sir. Denworth blinked hard. You do? Because your CEO asked for me, and you could not say no to her face. Calvin held his ground. So you put me at 8 in the morning in front of a freezing room, and you gave the national firm 60 minutes at 11 o'clock with fresh pastries at 10:30. That is exactly why I am on the agenda. The entire room went absolutely dead silent. Victoria Whitmore stared down at the table, a tiny smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. Harold Denworth slowly sat back down. That is, he stammered. That is not an accusation, sir. It is just the undeniable truth of the room. And I only have 20 minutes, so I figured we would just start with the truth and save 4. Mr. Brooks Denworth said, recovering his tone. You have exactly 1 hydraulic lift. Yes, sir. 1 lift, 1 mechanic. And I have it right here. A foreclosure notice on your commercial property with a sale date just 4 days from today. Yes, sir. And you are bidding on a $2.4 million contract. No, sir, Calvin said. Denworth stopped. I beg your pardon. I am not bidding 2.4. Calvin dropped his spiral notebook on the table. I am bidding 1.4. Somebody's pen hit the boardroom table. That is, Denworth's voice shifted. Mr. Brooks, that is $1 million under the incumbent. Yes, sir. That is not a bid. Nobody can do the work for that. That is not possible. It is possible, Calvin said, if you actually do the work. Explain that to me. Your current vendor bills $480 a unit for a 90-day preventive maintenance. 4 visits a year across 406 trucks. That is $780,000 a year in maintenance alone. Now, sir, I have been doing this for 15 years. A real inspection on a box truck takes 90 solid minutes. 90 minutes of hard labor, filters oil, a full brake inspection where a man actually pulls the wheel off. And they are doing them in 12, Calvin said. The room did not move a muscle. Excuse me? 12 minutes, some of them 15. Calvin opened his notebook. I have got 19 drivers out in the lobby who watched them do it. I have dates, I have truck numbers. I have a man in your lobby right now who wrote up his brakes 4 times on a green card. He got 4 stickers back, then put a box truck in a ditch outside Millington at 62 miles an hour. Harold Denworth went ghost white. That is Mr. Brooks. That is a very serious... Yes, sir. It certainly is. You cannot just come into this room and make a wild allegation like that without... Sir, I am not making an allegation. Calvin cut him off. I am making a bid. And the reason my bid is $1 million lower than theirs is not because I am cheap. It is because I am not charging you for 78 minutes of absolutely nothing 4 times a year on 406 trucks. That is the whole $1 million. That is it. That is the entire difference. You are not overpaying for labor, sir. You are overpaying for thin air. Denworth just stared blankly at him. Somebody at the far end of the table nervously cleared their throat. Harold, not right now. Harold, I ran that number while he was talking, the guy said. 78 minutes times 1,600 events. It is, he looked up, it's $940,000. Nobody said anything. Mr. Brooks Denworth said, and his voice had suddenly gone very, very careful. Even if every single word of that is accurate, you have 1 lift. You physically cannot service 406 fleet vehicles. No, sir, not today. Then this entire conversation is academic. Sir, may I ask you a question? That is not really how. Just one. Denworth just waved a hand. How long does it take you to build a service bay? Calvin asked. I am sorry, a bay, a lift, a pad, a compressor line. If your company pulled the trigger today, how long would it take? Denworth checked with the guy beside him. 6 weeks, the man said. Maybe 8. 6 weeks, Calvin repeated. So the physical gear I do not have takes 6 weeks and a purchase order. He pressed both hands flat against the boardroom table. Now, sir, how long does it take to build a mechanic who refuses to sign off on a box he never touched? Nobody answered. I have been trying to figure that out for 15 solid years. Calvin looked right at him, because I would love to hire 4 of them, and I will tell you what I found. There is 0 purchase order for that. You cannot buy it, you cannot rent it, and you absolutely cannot fire your way into it. You can only find it. And when you finally do, mister, you are staring at a man who is usually broke. Every single time. Because that right there is the heavy price of it. He tapped his notebook. You have 9 bays and a scanner and a bond 3 miles from here. Calvin locked eyes at a shop where the boss checks a 74-year-old woman and her hip before quoting her. He is on your agenda at 1:30. He has every single thing I do not. And in 4 years, he is going to do exactly what FleetCor did to you. And you will sit in this exact room with a stack of green cards and a man in a ditch wondering how it all happened again. Harold Denworth sat perfectly still. You are asking us, he said real slow, to take a massive leap of faith. No, sir. Calvin just shook his head. I am not asking you for a single thing. I am 20 minutes into the absolute worst month of my life, and I have 4 days left on my shop lease. I would honestly rather chew glass than ask you for a favor. He picked up the notebook. I am asking you to go check out truck 212. Denworth blinked hard. What? 212. It is sitting out in your yard right now. Bay 4, back row. It has a bad shake at 55 that got written up 11 times over 2 years and came back, no fault found, 11 times. Calvin closed his notebook flat. I never touched the rig. I am not even authorized to touch it. But I stood right next to it Tuesday morning, and I studied those front tires from 6 feet away. And sir, that is a totally shot tie rod end. I would bet my own shop on it, which, like you said, I only have 4 days left of anyway. The entire boardroom went dead silent. Send absolutely anybody out there, Calvin said. Send your worst mechanic. Send FleetCor. It is a $9 piece of metal, and it passed 11 times through a shop that bills you $480 a visit. And there is a real man driving that truck at 55 miles an hour every day with a grandson at home. He tucked the notebook back inside his coat. That is my actual bid, Calvin said. 1.4. 6 bays in 90 days. 3 techs named in writing, and every maintenance card signed by the exact hand that turned the wrench. And if you ever catch one that is not, tear the contract up that same day. No notice, no grace period. I will drive the truck back myself. He finally stood up. Mr. Brooks Denworth started to say, Sir, that is my 20 minutes. There are 4 route drivers and a guy named Denny Alvarado sitting out in your lobby. They took the morning off without pay to stand in that room, and they are definitely going to catch heat for it. And I would take it as a kindness if somebody went out and told them it was worth the risk. He pushed his chair in. Ma'am. And for the very first time, he looked down the table at Victoria Whitmore. The truck just sounds right. That is all. That is the only thing I actually came here to say to you. He hit the doorframe when Harold Denworth spoke in a totally different voice. Mr. Brooks. Calvin froze right there. Denworth was staring down at the cell phone in his hand. He had typed a quick message during those last 90 seconds. Somebody had just replied. I had our yard supervisor walk out to Bay 4, he said. The whole room pivoted. Denworth read the screen twice. Then he set the phone down onto the table very carefully, like it was a live grenade. Truck 212 is out in the back row, he said. It has a tie rod end with about a 1/4 inch of play in it. And he says Denworth stopped swallowing hard. He says he can move the wheel with his bare hand. Nobody even breathed. It is scheduled out at 4:30 this morning. Denworth tapped the desk. It is right on the board. It is hauling medical supplies straight to Jackson. Victoria Whitmore stood right up at the end of the table. Pull it, she snapped. Victoria, pull that truck right now, Harold. Denworth was already dialing. And Calvin Brooks just stood there in the doorway, his hand gripping the frame, his chest hammering like a bad air compressor. He watched 9 corporate executives turn and stare at a mechanic in a cheap, clean shirt who just handed them the ugly truth for free. Same exact thing he did in a rainstorm 11 days ago for a girl who could not stop crying. Harold Denworth slowly hung up the phone. He stood there for a second. Then he turned around and locked eyes with Calvin. This was a guy who had been running profit margins for 22 straight years, and he just got handed an equation he could not solve. "Sit down, Mr. Brooks," he finally said. "Sir, please, sit back down." Denworth reached over and pulled the chair out himself. "You have 1 working lift, 1 technician, and a bank foreclosure hitting in 96 hours. I have absolutely no idea what to do with you." He sat across from him. "So, let us start there." Harold Denworth leaned forward. "Tell me about the bank." "There is nothing to tell about the bank," Calvin said. "I owe $18,240. They want it paid by Friday. I do not have it. Can you get it?" "No, sir." "Mr. Brooks." "Sir, I have made roughly 60 desperate phone calls in the last 11 days, Calvin explained. "Every bank inside 100 miles, 2 credit unions, and some shady finance outfit down in Memphis that demanded 31%. I would have gladly taken it. They said no anyway. There is nothing left to borrow. I am not being brave here. It is just the math." Denworth looked down the table. "Victoria, do not." She stood her ground. "Do not look at me, Harold. It is not my call and it never was. It is $2.4 million. "It is 1.4, Calvin corrected. "And you are asking this company to award it to a guy who will not own a building on Monday." "I am not asking anybody for a thing. I have said that twice now," Calvin went on. "I will say it a 3rd time, and then I will walk out. I only came up here to tell you what is failing on your fleet. That is literally the only thing I know how to do. I told you the truth, and you can do whatever you want with it." He started to stand up again, and Harold Denworth, a corporate guy who had never once in his 22-year career done a single thing he could not defend in a spreadsheet, said, "Sit down." "Please, sir." "Mr. Brooks, I am asking you a personal favor," Denworth pleaded. That stopped Calvin dead in his tracks. You could literally hear what those words cost the man. "Give me 40 minutes. I have a bidder coming at 11. I have to look at his maintenance invoices very differently now. I want to review them while you are still in this building. That is all. Go sit in the lobby, drink our coffee. 40 minutes. Calvin ended up sitting out in that lobby for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Denny Alvarado sat beside him the whole time. He did not say a word until the 90-minute mark. "They pulled truck 212 off the board," Denny muttered. "I heard some guy came out and told the crew. Yard supervisor would not even look at me." Denny slowly turned the coffee cup in his hands. 19 solid years, mister. 19 years, I wrote it down on green cards, and you spotted it from 6 feet away. Anybody could have seen it, Denny." "No." Denny Alvarado shook his head. "That is the thing you totally miss about yourself. I will say it once, and then I am dropping it. Anybody could have looked. Nobody did." At 10:50, a black SUV pulled up. Ray Cray climbed out 3 hours early, wearing a pressed shirt with a leather folder under his arm. He walked right through the lobby doors and stopped dead in his tracks. Calvin Brooks, Tommy Pike, and 5 route drivers were all sitting in a neat row. Ray just stood there staring. Cal. Ray. Ray swept his eyes down the line of grease-stained men, and Calvin watched a man do panicked arithmetic in real time, landing on an answer he absolutely hated. "What did you do?" Ray demanded. "I told them the truth." "About what?" "About 12-minute maintenance checks." Ray Cray felt his face change by slow dropping degrees, and Calvin, a guy who had known him for 9 years and actively hated him for most of them, felt something he never expected. He actually felt pity. because Ray had bid 2.1. He bragged to Tommy about it years ago. 2.1. Ray thought he was the hungry shark in the room. He built his entire number on the exact same lie he was bidding against, and he never even knew it was a lie. He just assumed everybody stole a little off the top. He assumed that was just the business. You bid under him. Ray swallowed hard, a full million under. Ray laughed, and it came out sounding sick and wrong. You cannot do the actual work for that. I do the work for that every single day, Ray. Calvin did not blink. You have been watching me do it outside your window for 9 years and calling me soft. Ray just stood in the lobby with his folder. Then he said quietly, You know I do not have another 4 years in me. That building. I know all 9 bays. I know Ray. Ray Cray walked into the boardroom at 1:30. He did his 45 minutes. He was incredibly good. Polished. The guy even brought slides. Harold Denworth asked one last question, how long a 90-day preventative maintenance took in his shop. Ray said they were highly efficient, usually finished in under an hour. Then the energy hissed out of the room like air from a blown tire. Ray felt it immediately, but had no clue why. The phone rang at 4:15 the next afternoon, while Calvin was wrenched under a Corolla. Tommy answered it, calling out for Mr. Brooks. The raw panic in the kid's tone got Calvin sliding from under that chassis faster than he had moved in a decade. It was Denworth. He had 2 questions for Mr. Brooks and demanded honest answers, not modest ones. Calvin said, Yes, sir. 6 auto service bays in 90 days. Could he actually pull it off? If someone signs a purchase order Monday, yes, sir. Concrete takes the longest, 60 days if the weather holds. A heavy pause followed. Second question. Denworth wanted the names of the 3 technicians Calvin promised in writing. Name them right now. Thomas Pike. He is standing right here, and I do not have the other 2 yet. Dead silence filled the line. Denworth asked if Calvin understood what he just did. Calvin just repeated that he didn't have the men. Mr. Brooks, every other bidder handed me a roster of 40 names. Fleet Corps submitted a list featuring a mechanic who has been dead since March. I checked it myself this morning. Denworth let out a long, heavy exhale. You had a chance to lie, but you used it to admit you have 1 employee. Calvin replied he only had 1 employee. Denworth said he knew that was the entire problem, and possibly the entire answer. He had been awake since 3 a.m., trying to decide which. The board met on Thursday. The foreclosure sale was set for Friday at 10 a.m. Calvin Brooks heard absolutely nothing all day Thursday. So he just worked. That is what he did. He installed a water pump in a Camry and did a wheel alignment completely by eye on a Ranger. At 6 p.m., he closed out the register at $360. His best operating day in a whole month. None of it mattered. He counted the cash twice anyway. Amara was doing homework under the lamp. She asked her dad where they would go if the bank took the garage. Calvin sank heavily onto his stool. I don't know, he admitted. Probably Clarksville. There are auto shops in Clarksville. I would get hired somewhere. I am a good mechanic. She asked if he would still have his name on the building. No, baby. Amara stared at her homework for a long minute. That's okay, she said. You would still be the one doing the work, right? Calvin Brooks rested his head on his own workbench inside his own garage. He laughed until the sound cracked and turned into quiet sobbing. His 8-year-old daughter walked over, gently pressing her hand to the back of his neck. She stayed silent, a hard lesson she had learned directly from him. At 6:40 the next morning, 3 hours and 20 minutes before the sale, a black Mercedes pulled off Delford Street and crunched into the gravel. Victoria Whitmore stepped out alone. No trailing cars, no corporate filing cabinets. Calvin stood in the service bay holding a cold cup of coffee. Mr. Brooks? Ma'am? She hesitated for a split second. She confessed she wasn't legally permitted to be there. Legal told me not to come. Harold warned me against it. My communications head advised against this, then went and hid in his car. Calvin asked why she showed up then. Because I wanted to say it out loud here, not on a phone. Victoria Whitmore told him he won. Calvin froze, demanding she say it again. You won the contract. 1.4 million. 6 bays in 90 days. Capital advanced at 4%. That is a strict loan, Mr. Brooks. It is heavily documented, and you will pay back every single dime. Harold will personally enjoy collecting it. The board voted 9-1. She paused. Harold voted yes. Calvin set the coffee down. His hand was shaking. Why, he asked. Victoria said Harold pulled 6 years of Fleet Corps invoices. $11 million. He found $41 service events billed on days those trucks were out on the highway. Harold had signed off on every one. Every single one. For 6 years. She held his gaze. He walked into my office at 2 a.m. He told me a guy with just one lift caught the fraud in 11 days, and he completely missed it for 6 years. He confessed he didn't know how to live with that guilt. I told him to vote his conscience, and Harold simply replied, "That is exactly what I am so afraid of." Calvin stood in his garage. He muttered the bank was not his business. She cut him off. Mr. Brooks, I told you 19 days ago I would not write that check. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Victoria Whitmore raised her chin. I did do one thing. I will tell you what it was, and you can get as angry as you like. I had counsel send First Cumberland an executed vendor agreement worth $1.4 million annually for 5 years. It carried your name, stating the contract required your continued ownership of this land. She gave a slight shrug. That isn't a gift. That is a fact. They can do whatever they want with a fact. Gordon Veter called at 8:51. Calvin grabbed the first ring. Mr. Brooks. Veter sounded shaken. The sale's off. Calvin closed his eyes. They restructured it. Veter said 7 years at 6.2. Mr. Brooks, I want to tell you something. Then I will hang up and go be sick in the parking lot. I've worked here 4 years. I have never seen the committee reverse a commercial foreclosure, not even once. But an executive upstairs read that letter this morning and decided they were not going to be the bank that foreclosed on him. A pause. Not because it was right, because of how it would look. I know, Calvin said. Does that bother you? Calvin studied the crack in his concrete. Gordon, he replied softly. I stopped needing things to be pretty 15 years ago. I just needed my doors open at 6:15. The concrete crew broke ground on January 4th. They poured 6 new bays and a lube pit. That afternoon, Calvin walked out with a wooden stick and knelt down. Right before it set, he carved into the wet concrete back in the far corner where the parts washer would eventually go. RB, 1/1988. DB, always. Tommy Pike managed 3 technicians by March and 4 by June. He filed every service card in a drawer with the exact same hand that turned the wrench. When the state auditor came through and pulled 40 random tickets, the guy looked up from the drawer. He asked who taught him to document repairs like this. Tommy Pike simply answered, "My boss." He didn't elaborate. Denny Alvarado received a February card containing a check and a note from an unknown CFO. He never told anyone what it said. He kept it in the visor of truck 212 until the day he retired. Ray Crail finally sold Cray Precision Automotive in September. Calvin heard the rumors before the ink even dried, mainly because Delford Street is only 400 feet wide and absolutely nothing stays a secret. Calvin walked across the street on a Tuesday afternoon, his first time there in 9 years. Ray was slumped in his own waiting room in a leather chair, watching a muted television. "Come to look," Ray muttered. "Come to make an offer." Ray let out a laugh. "You going to buy me for 40 cents on the dollar, Cal? Now that would be something. That'd really be something." No, Calvin said. I want to buy your 9 bays for what they're worth, and I want you to run them. Ray Crail looked up. What? I need a fleet manager. Calvin sat down across from him. 406 trucks, and I'm still turning wrenches myself at 40 because I don't know how to stop. You ran 9 bays for 9 years and made payroll every Friday in a town with 20 cars. Ray, that is definitely not nothing. That's actually pretty hard. You hate me. I did. I called your kid's bus a threat, Cal. I know exactly what you did, Calvin replied, and I'm not asking you to forget it, because I never will. Here is the deal. You work for me. You never quote another repair price in your life. I handle that. You never look at another woman's hip, and the first time you look at a customer's coin purse and start doing the math, you are instantly done. I won't yell. I'll just open the door. Ray Crail sat with his hands over his face for a long time. Why, he asked, muffled. Because somebody stopped for me outside Knoxville in 1994, Calvin said. I've been trying to pay him back for 30 years, and I can't. He's dead. There is no way to square that debt. The only thing you can do is hand it to the next person. He stood up. Ray, you're the next person. You're just standing there. That's all it is. Ray Crail worked for Calvin 11 years, never quoting a price. Sienna Whitmore came by the auto shop almost every Saturday that first year. Then she kept coming for 4 more years. She and Amara would just sit on the heavy metal toolbox, eating sandwiches and loudly arguing over music. She even learned to run a torque wrench, though not very well. By her junior year of college, she told her mother she was dropping finance. Victoria Whitmore stared at her. To what? Sienna answered anything where somebody hands me a bottle of water. Victoria never understood that, but she signed the transfer forms anyway. Then came a Friday evening in May. 20 months after a girl chewed up 11 miles of asphalt on a bare rim, they finally switched on the sign. It cost $4,000. Calvin had battled the sign guy over that price for 6 solid weeks. It read Brooks Auto and Tire. Underneath, just because Amara insisted, and he never once won against her, established 1988. The whole block came out. Marlene Ellis stood right in front, clutching her coin purse. Denny Alvarado brought his grandson. Tommy Pike hung near the back, hands shoved in his pockets. An envelope folded 4 times into his shirt. 10-year-old Amara Brooks just watched the bright neon wash over her dad's name. "Dad," she whispered. "I knew this place would become something special." Calvin Brooks scanned his shop. The 6 bays here, the 9 across the street. The drivers, the old women, his mechanics. He stared at a jagged crack in the concrete he never bothered to patch. "Baby," he said, "it was always special." He squeezed her shoulder tight. People just finally looked.